Thinkers, gamers, welcome back to Tales of Praxis. I am your host, Aaron Suduko, the founder of withaterriblefate.com, your favorite online source for all of the most rigorous, in-depth analyses of video games as a storytelling medium, as analyzed by the gamers who are passionate about those stories and just want to better understand them and build a better language for celebrating them with like-minded gamers, whether that's in the written word or podcasts or convention appearances or indeed even streams such as this one. Grail, my goodness, you are more punctual than I am, even though I'm the one who starts these things. I don't even know how that's possible, but it delights me. It is so nice to see you back, my friend. We had a good long riff on second act structures and everything else at the beginning, really in the first act of last stream, really for the first 40 minutes or so. So I am going to dive in more immediately this time to Tales of Berseria. If you are just tuning in at the top of it and are not familiar with the series, like Grail, I'll just let you know quickly. It's a series that I started a few months ago for With a Terrible Fate, specifically focused on streaming and analyzing through written work the storytelling impact and narrative language of Bandai Namco's Tales series. We've been doing that on stream through Tales of Symphonia and Dawn of the New World and Tales of Zestiria and now Tales of Berseria. I've been playing other ones off stream, publishing on a range of them. The latest new written work that is out as of last Friday for those who are interested is something that I think the more I've been thinking about it drives to the heart of what has kept me coming back to Tales of Symphonia over the years. So if you are interested in checking that out, thinking about how its relationship building mechanics especially contribute to its narrative themes and what makes it so magical as a game, I encourage you to take a look, read that. Let me know what you think. Grail, a camper. Yes, I camp in many a game, so it's good to see you bringing that to the philosophy of the real life JRPG party. So I appreciate that. I learned so many new tricks from you. Pottery breaking. Welcome, first time chatter. I'm delighted to hear that you've made your way from YouTube over to here. That's been kind of my secret hope. Grail also did that. I believe he found us through YouTube first and is now migrating over. Hopefully the live chat and conversation is enough to make it worth your while, but I'm glad you've been enjoying it on YouTube as well. We are working through kind of I guess not the so early motions anymore of Tales of Berseria's second act. Last time we wrapped things up with Rokuro's first confrontation with his brother, Shigure, and then we boarded a ship to try to find Magilu's friend Grimoire to decode the text that Laphicet got in hopes of figuring out more about Inominat and how to take down the Abbey and Artorias. But, of course, as happens on the high seas when you're traveling with the Reaper, everybody came down with the sickness, namely the Corsair Scourge, I believe it was called. So we had to take a detour in order to make sure that all of the humans on board don't die. And we are searching through the woods for an herb and preparing to deal with some kind of demon infestation. The only other general update that I wanted to give to the group on Tales of Praxis and With the Terrible Fate things before we dive in is I started yesterday my speed through replaying Tales of Arise on top of this, because that's going to be a part of the lecture that Dan Hughes and I are going to be giving at PAX West over Labor Day weekend. I don't think that's going to be streamed this time around by PAX, even though they usually are. So I'm going to do my damnedest to get a recording of that to share with everyone. The topic of the panel is Pokemon a JRPG? So it's going to be a little bit of Pokemon. Dan's been doing a really great series studying that in podcast form and reflecting on its storytelling and his personal experience with it. It's going to be a little JRPG, a lot of Tales of Praxis, thinking about the Tales games. And I think one of the centerpieces is going to be doing a comparison of Tales of Arise with Final Fantasy 16. So it's been great to go back to that. It is definitely a speed through, not in the sense of a literal speed through. I'm doing it to absorb the story, but in the sense that I'm firing up my fully loaded file for a New Game Plus and just bursting through everything, which actually is really good to keep with the cadence of the game and its storytelling, I think. So having a lot of fun with that. I'm sure we'll have occasion to talk about it a lot more as I get further into it and start putting together stuff for the panel. I will say it's been fun to play after so recently replaying Tales of Symphonia, because I don't think I processed the first time through how much so much of Tales of Arise echoes parts of Tales of Symphonia in really cool ways, from the party's philosophy of just figuring out how to solve the problem in front of them, and then if something else arises after that, no pun intended, they'll figure out how to cross that bridge when they come to it, to even stuff like in this playthrough, as Symphonia has been so fresh in my mind, I've been like really tempted to compare the 5 lords, the Renan lords who are holding dominion over Dana in the first act, to the 5 Desian Grand Cardinals, which I don't think I thought about the first time through, but it seems like a really compelling and interesting and natural analogy when you have the context of Symphonia in your head. So having a great time. It's definitely going to be a good lecture, so I look forward to that. If you're able to make it out to Seattle, so much the better. We love having these conversations in person, but even if not, hope to share it online afterwards, and we can chat about it. I think that's all I've got, so we can dive back in, my friends. If I seem like wildly energetic, that's also because taking on yet another Tales game, I've been a little more strapped in terms of sleep and just time management, so I'm a little over-caffeinated, but that's okay. As Grail has said over the last couple streams, the last few have been a little more low-key and mellow, so maybe we can counterbalance that now with one that's a little more high energy, for better or worse. Let me catch up with your messages, my dear friends, and then we will jump into Berseria. Pottery Breaking, a freak about Vesperia. Then I do hope you stay tuned. If you haven't seen it, like you're not caught up on the streams, one thing I've been talking about the last few times is the next study that I'm working on, which will hopefully be out sooner rather than later, is a comparative study looking at Tales of Vesperia and Tales of Destiny, because I think they both say kind of interestingly similar, but maybe anti-parallel things about like the concept of destiny in a deflationary way, and kind of showing you how people have ownership over what they typically think of as destiny and things that are out of their control. So I spent so long living in Vesperia for Tales of Praxis. I probably spent about 110, 120 hours on the definitive edition. So it was one that I feel like I really didn't get or appreciate my first time through years ago, but it was so nice to go back to it, and I have a lot of thoughts. So I'm excited to dive into that, and I would love to know what you think once I publish. I like that quick saving comes off as a joke. I'd be interested in hearing more about what the joke is. But we have been developing a few running bits, which is nice. We're getting a sense of humor all our own on Tales of Praxis, which is fitting for these more modern Tales games, all of which have their own senses of humor, which is fantastic. See, now I will be interested to argue with you about this as I get further into my replay of Tales of Arise, Grail, because I think I know what you mean by saying it's Tales of Symphonia, but less complicated. I don't know if I agree with that. I feel like part of why I want to get all the way through it again is because I feel like the first act of it is very Tales of Symphonia. And then I don't think that I would say it's less complicated. I think it just goes in different directions and brings in some stuff from some of the other games. Actually, it's interesting to bring up Vesperia, because without spoiling stuff for Tales of Arise, I kind of, even just anticipating what comes next, kind of feel the presence of Vesperia a little bit looming over it. So, but it'll be really interesting to unpack as we get deeper in. If you do get the chance to play Destiny, I highly recommend it. It was a delight for me to play for Tales of Praxis, because it's one I had never played before either. But I would say it really holds up, as old as it is, that PS1 version. Especially if you continue engaging on the live stream Pottery Breaking. Really interested to get your perspective on what you'd love to see us stream next, because I haven't decided which one I'm going to stream after Berseria, but my goal is to play through and study and write about all of them for Tales of Praxis. So if there's one that you've never played, if there's one that's your favorite, let me know what would be most interesting to you. I've been saying over the stream for a while that I think about the live chat as the real life JRPG party, working through this stuff as like a real time book club together. So I want it to be as useful and interesting to all of you all as possible. So definitely happy to take recs on those. Oh, well, there you go, pottery breaking. So much the better. If destiny isn't a concept that's top of mind when you think about Vesperia, I hope that my article can, if not bring it top of mind for you, at least give you some new perspectives on it. That's the lion's share of what I try to do in those studies anyway. And I think, a lot of people talk about having trouble finding the through line or seeing the forest for the trees in Vesperia. And I'll tell you that I think for me, playing it right after Tales of Destiny and seeing it through this lens was part of what helped me to finally do that. So maybe it'll be interesting for you and something that we can chat about too. Yeah, Grail has all of the tips and tricks on how to, play the ones that haven't actually been officially ported over to the US. So I'm hoping to also mooch off of Grail when the time comes for me to do that, because I've been restraining myself to the official US releases up until now. There was some talk of Legendia next. I think Grail was the one who brought that up last time. So, but whatever comes next is anyone's guess at this point. With that, I think we're caught up. A delight to have you both here, my friends. Let's dive back into some Berseria. And last time, of course, we stopped in the middle of the woods, so it's safe to say I'm probably lost in the woods at this point. So the first order of business is figuring out which the hell way we were going next.
Great. Let's do this one run get you style, guys.
Pottery breaking. Is it your first time playing that?
This will be big. What a treasure.
If so, I am so jealous. That's one of those games or stories where just there's nothing like your first time experiencing it, no matter how much people have talked about it in the popular culture or anything. It's just such a magical experience in my mind. So whether or not it's your first time playing through it, I envy your experience with it.
Scout ship setting sail.
That was a project that I did last year with a terrible fate. Actually, at PAX West, the same conference we'll be speaking at this Labor Day weekend. Last year, we gave a lecture on the entire Final Fantasy VII series. So all of the releases and supplementary content between the original Final Fantasy VII and then everything that they did up through intermission. And that, I played all of those inside of a month, and let me tell you, it was such an experience. I made the joke, I think, at the panel that it felt like I was submerging my body in a Mako bath of information about Final Fantasy VII, because I was so deep in all of the nuances and intricacies and lore by the end of it, which I think it really is one of those game series to me that rewards that kind of intense focus and sequential playing of the titles, because otherwise it's just... it's kind of like the Tales games in the sense that if you don't do them right after the other, it's really easy to lose a lot of the nuance and subtlety of what they're doing with their story and, the themes that they're playing with and all the points that they're trying to make. So, yeah, if you find yourself really enjoying it, strongly recommend you consider doing that at some point. Looks like this is new. We haven't opened that chest yet, so let's do it.
I'll end this quickly.
They did lie to you. I will say I had an interesting experience because the first time that I played Remake, I had played the other stuff before, but I was playing it with my girlfriend at the time, and she had not played and wasn't familiar with any of them. And I was actually really impressed with how much of it she was able to follow. I wouldn't say that, she was able to understand the intricacies of everything they were doing with Remake, because there's simply no way that you can do that, I don't think, without the background context. But she was able to kind of appreciate and understand the story, except for maybe all of the cut-ins of Sephiroth. But besides that, she was really dialed in. And so I think, bright side, maybe you didn't get the experience you were looking for the first time out of Remake, but I would be really interested in getting your thoughts about having played Remake and going back and playing the original, how Remake colors your thoughts about the original, and then who knows if you go back and play Remake again after that. It's it's not as if there's a right or wrong place to start, but I think where you start definitely informs your later perspective on it. I might have just fucked us. Yeah, there's not a way to get back there, and I think I remember this from last time, because we need it set this way in order to get out of here, right? So there must be another switch somewhere, because the two routes that seemed like the way forward into a Code Red Demon were both walled off behind a fire elemental barrier. If you're only going to play one Grail, 10's a hell of a good one. Although I will say, I'll never miss an opportunity to sing the praises of 9, because I think not enough people have played that, and it's so smart and beautiful. And I think a lot of the core themes that the series as a whole is concerned with come out in a really well-articulated way in 9. So I strongly recommend that as well. No, Grail, not yet. I need to find where the other fucking switch is. My guess is it's back this way, but if you remember and I'm just wasting time going in the wrong direction, you can shout it out. I won't be offended. Is this it? Nope. Fuck me, I guess. All right. Well, then I'm gonna try going back around. I think that was a better way of going. Actually, while we've naturally started talking about Final Fantasy as well, I will say one thing I was actually reflecting on as I picked up Arise again was a couple years ago when Arise first came out, and I was playing through it for the first time. It was actually this funny timing. I don't know if either of you relates to this, but it was one of those moments when, I was having a number of pretty hard challenges in my personal life, and I was pretty down. And kind of just by kismet, I ended up playing in quick succession Tales of Arise and Final Fantasy IX, and it was also around that time when my friend and colleague Dan Hughes, as he's known around these parts, came and visited me, and he introduced me to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for the first time. And I was telling him as I picked up Arise again, I really feel like between you being there and introducing me to JoJo and my playing those two games and the particular kinds of themes they were concerned with, that really dug me out of a dark period in my life in a way that I don't think would have happened really otherwise. So, we all talk about how special video games are and storytelling are, and obviously that's kind of taken for granted here because that's what With a Terrible Fate is all about, but I think sometimes it's so easy to say that and forget what it really means. And I mean, those different stories and pieces of media really can make such a difference in people's lives. So I think it is worth, taking time to stop and appreciate the difference that these stories and games have made for you. I wouldn't wish those sorts of bad times on anyone, but if you have had them, I hope you've also had the pleasure of, games and stories that really resonate with you to give you a different perspective and find your way out of it. The middle one with the loop. Okay, good looking out. Thank you, Grail. What, you don't want to see me just walk in circles while I'm talking about things that are vaguely related to the game for 40 minutes before we start? That's basically what we did on Monday without the walking in circles. I think I have to go this way to find my way back there. So pottery breaking, not to put you in the hot seat, but since this is your first time joining the live stream and you get the benefit of the conversation, I am going to put you in the hot seat because as I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks with this lecture that Dan and I are going to be giving at PAX West, a big part of that is the question of how we think about genre in video game storytelling and how that can be a useful tool for finding our way into thinking about the stories of games, but also how that can sometimes hinder our understanding of those stories and games. And the centerpiece for that will be thinking about the genre of the JRPG. And so, Grail has answered this. Other people on the stream have answered it. I'm going to be answering it in one way or another at the lecture, so I'm not in the hot seat right now. But I will ask you, clearly you're into JRPGs. Imagine that a gamer friend of yours came to you and, this person is familiar with games, but they haven't really played JRPGs before. And they said, hey, I know you're really into these games. I've heard a lot about JRPGs, but I don't really know, I don't know what they're about. It feels kind of intimidating to get into them. Could you just give me a little description of what they are so I could better understand what I'm getting myself into? If that kind of person came to you, how would you define a JRPG to them? That's not an oh no moment, pottery breaking. That's an oh yes moment. You've found your tribe. If you can talk about this stuff on end, this is the one place where you should feel free to do that. That's why we do it. Yeah, well, challenge accepted, pottery breaking. I will let you know if we get to the point where I regret it, but if you've been watching the stuff on YouTube and you're familiar with us and me, you should know it's a tall order to get me to regret asking a question like that. So bring it on. I will also say, Grail, I know you and I both have been going back and forth a lot on this combat system, and I do think I appreciate it in its way, but I will also say it really felt like a breath of fresh air to go from playing this to playing Tales of Arise. I know Arise isn't the same combat system as old school Tales, but oh man, it feels so fluid to me. It's one that I understand a lot better. I feel capable and competent when I'm using it. It's night and day compared to Berseria and Zestiria. Okay, yeah, this feels more correct. Oh, okay, because this is gonna kick us out on the other side of the seal, right? Yeah, so why don't you like it when you fight bosses, Grail? I remember we talked about this a little in the past. Did you say something like you think they're too tanky or something like that? Because I don't feel like for me it's something that decreases in quality when I fight bosses. If anything, actually, there are a few bosses where I don't typically remember Tales games for the gameplay around bosses, but I remember a few boss fights really vividly in terms of feeling like it was really just intense and satisfying combat and long drawn out fights, but in a way that was really satisfying to me and where I felt accomplished at the end of it. Pottery breaking coming in with a wall of text. Me love it. I live inside of walls of text. Let me take a minute to read this as we venture on here. Okay, so that was a little unbearable, Grail, but thanks to your help at least, it was not that long until we found our way out of that puzzle, so that's something. Okay, so a JRPG, typically, that's a good qualifier, is a game that tends to feature an adventuring party of 4 to 8 deep and motivated characters with involved and evolving combat systems and stories that typically start small and end large, but where the party characters are always at the heart of it. Yeah, I like that. I think that touches on a lot of themes that we've been thinking about, not only on the stream, but also in the JRPG definitions that a lot of other people have offered. I like that because it sounds like, you don't quite equate the two, but, you talk about involved and evolving combat systems, and you could almost say that exact same thing about the storytelling, like an involved and evolving story. Because if you think about a story that starts out small and grows to the scope that you typically think about in a JRPG endgame, you might say that's evolving along with the combat system. And then when I think about some of the JRPGs that have meant the most to me, like, I don't know, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 off the top of my head, I feel like oftentimes the most memorable combat systems for me will evolve in ways that are like directly related to the story, where all the new like abilities and elements of the complexity of the combat that are being added all have like direct and really satisfying resonance with the evolving beats in the story as you go on. Oh, well, that instantly makes sense, what you just said, Grail, because I know just from talking with you that you put a lot of premium on stunning and avoiding being stunned. So I feel like, especially if that's your metric of like a test of your skill, like if you can stun and avoid being stunned, which seems fair in a lot of games, then I can see why Arise would not scratch that particular itch. That makes sense. Oh, yeah, sorry. So we were saying the exact same thing. I just wasn't parsing your text right. That's my bad. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder whether, did you just pull like 4 to 8 characters out of your ass, or like is there like more of a principled thinking behind that particular number? Because I probably wouldn't have said 4 to 8 if you put a gun to my head, but I instinctively feel that there's something accurate about that, or like in JRPGs where there are fewer characters than that, it feels kind of off to me in the sense that it does sort of veer into a different genre. And I was really thinking about this with the Tales games as well, because especially going from something like Tales of Vesperia with like 9 characters who can carry all the way through to the end game in the definitive edition, and then down to 6 in Tales of Arise, like on the one hand, yeah, only 3 additional characters, but it's one of those things where every additional character added has like exponential compounding complexity in terms of like the overall relationships between the party, because those new characters have to have relationships with all of the other characters in the party if it's going to be compelling. So you do kind of, I at least, get overwhelmed when you have characters in the main party over a certain threshold. So 4 to 8 sounds right to me. Yeah, and when you do see over 8, it's hard to wrap your head around. I get that. Yeah. And it's funny because you have, like, in Symphonia, you also have 9 characters, but they're never all in the party at once. You have 8 max, and you wouldn't think that makes that much of a difference. But I feel the difference so much in Symphonia versus Vesperia. Like, having that one extra person and all of them having very distinctive roles and perspectives, whereas, yeah, Zelos is a very different character from Kratos, but it's easy, especially given how they're coded in the party, to see them as complements to one another. Like, Vesperia's party feels much more complicated to me than Symphonia's. Maybe also because all of those characters are much more interested and invested in their own individual things, whereas the Symphonia characters are all kind of mirrors and complements to one another, kind of reflecting the different themes and storytelling of those different games. Yeah, that's a fair point about Vesperia's boss fights too, Grail. I appreciate that.
You there! What do you think you're doing here?
We could ask the same of you.
Well, come on, Grail. You just asked and answered your own question, though, right? Tales of Arise is all about breaking down walls. In the story and in the combat. But I get your point. I know what you're saying.
Is something going on back there? They didn't look like they were demon hunting.
Ah! Are you making that move? No, it just did it by itself. He's in sync with his compass, just like Eizen and his coin.
Eizen, you're an Earth Moloch, right? Do you sense anything around here?
No, I don't. It seems Laphicet's senses are sharper than mine.
Oh, pottery breaking. Sorry, I missed your question about combat party size relating to party size. So I want to answer that before we get too far off it. Really good question. I think maybe that's got to be part of it, right? Because the base size of your party, I think in some ways forms like the foundational schema for how you think about like one party unit in terms of how to organize all of the characters that you're dealing with and thinking about, which is interesting because like I don't think this is the only reason that I feel this way, but I think part of what makes it much easier and more intuitive for me to wrap my head around the party members of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is the fact that even though there are 6 of those main characters, they are all involved in combat all the time, which maybe makes it a little more complex and challenging to handle combat. But I do think with that as the base unit of like party engagement, and then the smaller like interlinked 2 character pairs within that, it's easier to schematize the whole party in your head. Whereas if you just have like the 4 character mental model and then they push beyond 2 units of that, especially in a way that's uneven, it might be challenging to do. Makes me wonder then, like, if you were to really push it to the limit and have 12 characters in a party, like, would that just break your brain, or would it actually in some ways be easier to wrap your head around than an uneven distribution like 9 or 10 characters?
It stopped, but something still feels wrong.
Like what?
It kind of feels like when we got sealed inside that Earth Pulse.
So a force similar to Inominat's power? I'm starting to think this may be no ordinary demon we're dealing with here.
Yeah, I'm going to cautiously modulate my own commentary so that the stream doesn't just become a lecture on Xenoblade Chronicles 3. So I will just say, yes, Grail. I completely agree with that. Pottery breaking, by the way, apropos of nothing, it needs to be said that I love your handle, pottery breaking. That's just, chef's kiss. Love that username.
Always be on guard.
Always be on guard. Who do you think you are, Eleanor? Kisara? And that's how you know Aaron is fighting his way through a rise in the background. I'll also say, oh man, talk about exceptional voice actors and also breaking my brain by hearing the same person in very different contexts. Playing this alongside Arise and listening to Ray Chase voice both the villainous Artorias and the paragon of heroism Alphen, and juggling those, it's like, oh man, it's a mental exercise as much as anything else. He's so versatile. And I was watching the dubbed version of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in my rewatch this time around, and I didn't realize that in the dub he also voices Bucciarati. So I was, watching Golden Wind at the same time, and like my brain was melting from the overload of Ray Chase. Melting in a good way. It was a good melt. Yeah, so I get what you mean about Zestiria pottery breaking. I think it feels small to me too. I would say like the devil's advocate position there is, I think to me, especially doing the replay of it that I did on the stream, it felt small in the sense of feeling intimate, where I think a lot of that game is Sorey navigating like the dangers of isolation and loneliness and really deciding the path that he wants to walk, and recognizing that when someone really does stay true to their individual desires, there's a risk of isolating yourself by not letting other people share in those. And so I think it's a party that wants to feel small, I think, in terms of what the story is trying to talk about, because to me at least, that was a big part of how and why you really feel it at the end when all of the Seraphim sacrifice themselves one by one in Zaveid's gun to take down Heldalf, and really makes all the more meaningful the final fight when it's just Sorey versus Heldalf, and the way in which Sorey is able to overcome Heldalf's loneliness. That's always the threat for him, right? Is the threat of ending up isolated and lonely in the way that Heldalf is. Grail, boo, you and your bait. I'm not going to take it, man. Maybe later in the stream, but it's too early for that now. Oh, I fucking hate you, Grail. I didn't realize that Shion and Magulu have the same voice actors. That's going to really mess with my head much more than Ray Chase. No, for sure, pottery breaking, and I know what you mean. It's no, it's all about sharing and working through the opinions, so don't feel as if you have to defend it
Looks like a dead
in that
end up
sense.
ahead. Laphicet, do you feel anything here?
That's a big part.
Not right now.
Since this is her first time joining the real life JRPG pottery breaking, I will say a big part of the fun I've had, especially on the streaming part of Tales of Praxis so far, is yeah, it's so much fun to revisit the games that I really loved and shaped me as a gamer as a kid. But I've almost had more fun, if not just as much fun, going back to the ones that I really didn't appreciate as a kid and trying to see them and dig into them in a new way through like adult gamer eyes and with, you know, my work in the philosophy of video game storytelling and everything like that. Like Dawn of the New World, I didn't give the time of day as a kid. Now I feel like I have a very different appreciation and at least understanding of the story they were trying to build off of Tales of Symphonia. And I feel the same way about Zestiria. Like I totally wrote it off at the time that I played it when it first came out. But I think working through it in a more active way and trying to dig into, okay, what are the characters really thinking about now? What is the nature of their world? How is that changing over the course of the story like we did on the stream? Like I wouldn't say that suddenly flipped a switch that made it my favorite Tales game. But it did make me realize, like I talk about at the end of that stream, if you said you're still working through it on YouTube, that I think there's a lot more depth to the game than a lot of people realize at first glance. And I don't think that's the fault of the people who play it. I think part of the trick that the game is playing on you is that what it wants to talk about to a great extent is sort of how certain aspects of the way we see the world and each other and our obligations in the world can be very deceptive and superficial if we don't take the time to really interrogate them, but there's a lot more depth to it lurking below the surface if we actually make the effort with ourselves and each other. And I think that comes through as much with our experience of the game as with the content within it.
Look! Purple flowers!
Yep, Salatoma.
Is the demon the real reason the Abbey's closed off the forest?
Worry about it later. It's flower picking time.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's a fair point, pottery breaking.
I told you these things were hard on the eyes. I mean, who puts those colors together?
I will say, I do hope the one thing that the stream might be able to move the needle on with regard to that is one thing I harp a lot on, so you've probably heard me talk about it in the YouTube VODs, is I think a big part of the storytelling language of video games, broadly speaking, is the way in which different gameplay systems can be used to tell stories and create narrative meaning. And I think the Tales games are great for that. So that doesn't mean that, you know, seeing a narrative meaning in a gameplay system like Zestiria's armatization system is suddenly going to make you feel like, oh yeah, this gameplay is really engaging and fun. Of course, it's not going to do that. But I think, at least for me, when we think about like the storytelling of games, if we can understand the gameplay not just as something that is designed to be entertaining, but as something that might be trying to engage or speak to the core points of the narrative, at least it can give me like a better understanding of why it's there in the first place, which can help me to sort of appreciate it in a more sort of like, you know, sanitized way, even if it's not my favorite system to actually play in the way that, like I was saying at the top, Arise's combat system is just, you know, pure fun to me. Yeah, we'll have to keep talking about Arise as I get further into it, Grail, because I don't want to spoil things too much for people, nor for myself, because I weirdly, even though I played it like 2 years ago, I don't remember it super well. But yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on it too, and I know it's like more controversial than I expected it to be, so it'll be fun to talk about, definitely. Hell yeah! All right, so I'm talking to a fellow super fan of Ludo narrative, as the eggheads in game studies call it. So it's always a pleasure to meet one of those besides myself, pottery breaking.
Yeah.
You're in
they're
good company
real
here on
nice
this stream.
looking. But if they help the others, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, Grail, I just had the first fight with that mysterious swordsman you're talking about before I jumped onto the stream, and it was a pleasure to get reacquainted with him.
Is this the Reaper's curse yet again?
We're just getting started.
Ooh, that's like what happened in the Abbey. Also like the art for Insect Barrier, for any Yu-Gi-Oh fans in the audience.
Barrier. Even my praetor hearts can't break that. What's going on here? Why go to such lengths to keep this demon alive?
Either way, I don't think we're hauling how many flowers unless we beat up Mr. Bugglesworth here.
Right. Everyone, let's do this.
Are you talking about his Mystic Art pottery breaking? Or a different one? Because I definitely feel that way about his Mystic Art. Oh, the, Love Shot, or whatever it's called.
Fantasizing can help us get rid of it.
Yeah, that's a great one, too. I think I talked about it on the stream before, but I found a lot of love for Raven that I didn't have before in my most recent replay as well. I think playing through Symphonia before it and thinking about Zelos helped me with that, because in some ways, they're similar characters. But yeah, I immediately thought of his Mystic Art when you're talking about that, because, you know, not even just in terms of how it's tied to the story and everything that his heart represents, but also just I remember being really moved in an unexpected way after the first time I used it in battle, where, you know, in Vesperia there are skits following every time you use a character's Mystic Art for the first time. And when he uses his, the party's like, oh man, yeah, do you think your heart can take that, old man? Like, should you be doing that? And he kind of laughs it off, and he's like, oh yeah, it'll be fine, it's no worries, because he's Raven, right? Of course he's going to laugh it off. And then they leave, and he just has like a really quiet, sober moment with himself where he's like, yeah, I really don't know how much more of this I can take. Oh. There's a lot of understated depth in those characters, I think, that I appreciated this time around. But I do feel like, I mean, you have to slog through probably at least twice as many hours as the average Tales game in order to find it. I think that's the trade-off. Oh, can they automatically swap out too? I don't think that I clocked that last time. That's nice. Yeah, we've been talking about this too. I definitely appreciated Carol a lot more on my my most recent playthrough, because I was talking about it with Grail, and I don't know if you feel this way as well, pottery breaking, but we both kind of had this thought of like, man, you know, there's a certain sense in which at least a major chunk of Vesperia's story is primarily about Carol, and when I played through it this time, thinking about that from the get-go, it really helped me to see him in a new light and like appreciate his struggles in a way where the first time playing it, I mostly just found him annoying and immature, which I don't think is fair to him, because he is a kid, right? Of course he's immature. That's the point.
Phew! Insect collecting is a sweatier hobby than I thought.
Yeah. Speaking of hearts, there we go.
Can we keep him?
No, hand it over. I'll dispose of it.
Oh, come on, Velvet. Let Laphicet have one nice thing.
The Abbey had some reason for protecting it. Maybe we should keep it alive for observation.
Yeah, I believe that, Grail, especially considering it was more heat than I was expecting, even at the normal difficulty that we're doing.
You want it, you feed it.
I will. I'll take care of it.
She did let him have one nice thing.
Anyway, now that we've got these flowers, Eleanor and my crew ought to be out of danger.
Hey, forgetting somebody? It looks like we've closed the door on this little episode. That insect demon was a bit of a surprise, but I still think this curse business is overblown.
I can count on one hand how many have survived more than 3 years at my side. If you're not careful, you might wind up as corpse number 50.
50?
That's how many comrades I've lost.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just saying, don't let your guard down.
Right.
Now that we've got what we need, we should get back to the ship.
I wonder what they call this kind of bug.
I will say, just to wrap our side conversation on Arise as well, Grail, one thing
Take a
that
look at this.
I've really loved about replaying these Tales games in general is, even with the ones that I haven't played in a while,
Wow.
knowing
They found a
where
whole
the
bunch.
story and the character development is going totally changes the context for me whenever I replay, I mean, basically any game, but especially the Tales games. So that's been a lot of fun, and I think it's definitely something that is the case for Vesperia, like we were talking about, in terms of seeing it through the lens of, like Carol's development, or, like the role that Raven ultimately has, or the different relationships that different characters have with Duke. I mean, there are so many different ways that you can cash it out. But then also I'm really feeling it in Arise, where I get what you were saying about wanting to, spend more time or dig more into the characters. But I think there's almost a certain sense in which I feel like I'm able to dig into them more from the outset of the story, just knowing where the story is going to go and the way those relationships are developing. Because knowing that from the outset, I mean, you see so many of the small moments in different lights, and you kind of understand the arcs and developments that they're contributing to. So I think we talked a decent amount on last stream, actually, in terms of how
Scout
for
ship setting
a series that is so self-consciously concerned with character-based storytelling, oftentimes some of the characters are kind of more caricatures or gestures than really richly developed, like people and representations of people. But I think a lot of the time, or at least some of the time, in stuff like Arise and even Symphonia and things like that, I feel like oftentimes it's more like there is the character depth there, but it's character depth that is really hard to see until you play through the game multiple times. I think that's part of the special magic for me of the way that New Game Plus works in the Tales games especially. It's like I oftentimes feel like I don't have a firm handle on the characters until I play the
Way
game
into that
several
thing,
times.
aren't you?
Can we fast travel out of here, or do we need to go manually? Maybe we can't, or am I stupid? See, this is my other problem. Like, the world map works differently here than in Arise, and so figuring out how to fast travel. Oh, you have to use the portals. Got it. Thank you, Grail. Yeah, Pottery Breaking, if you haven't checked out my new article about Regal, which I published last week, encourage you to do so if you think the same way about that stuff, because that's a big part of what that article is about, just the idea that really you get to know the characters and the themes in very different ways, in ways that resonate with a lot of the core themes, especially of Symphonia, I think, when you replay it multiple times through different lenses. Yeah, I was kind of stunned at my playthrough of Remastered, Grail, because I don't think I ever took Genus out of my party in maybe any of my playthroughs as a kid, and I think I used him maybe like 5% of the time or less in my my playthrough of Remastered. Well, you do, and he's such a great caster, but it's an interesting stream if you haven't watched that one, because it's up on YouTube too. But I found myself so drawn from a narrative perspective to the Tetheala characters, especially, which was something that I don't think I really felt the gravity of as a kid. But I think especially as I've gotten older and gotten more attuned to characters who are like working through heavy experiences from their past or previous quests they've been on that we don't get to play through as characters. Like the Tetheala characters all, I think, revolve around that in a way that is much less immediately present for the Silverhand characters. And so I ended up really playing through most of the game with like Sheena, Regal, Presea, and I forget who I used as my fourth floater. Maybe Lloyd for most of it. Maybe Rain for when I needed healing. But yeah, primarily the Tethaela gang.
A bit of an awkward question. What kind of demon would you say Velvet is?
Well...
Oh, don't worry. I'm not trying to find a vulnerability or anything.
Oh, so you know what I'm talking about, pottery breaking. Oh, so you are a deep audience member of our YouTube channel. I didn't realize that. Fantastic. Well, I'm glad you found it sufficiently interesting to stay with for that long. And yet it took you this long to join the actual stream. Where have you been, buddy? Better late than never.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty much.
And really, I mean, I say better late than never, but I took stock last night, and I think I'm really, like, about halfway through the whole series at this point, which is daunting. I think it'll easily be over 1,000 hours when I'm done with everything, but it's fun to have so much ahead, too. It's only going to get more interesting to see all of those intertextual connections as we get through more of the texts.
There's some kind of connection.
Not that it matters if he turned back, demon or not, he's dead either way.
Whatever it is, it's of no concern to a pirate.
If I were you...
Well, I'm impressed that you did catch up. Cheers to you.
If things were normal, we wouldn't have found each other.
You have a point.
Sorry I couldn't help, Eleanor.
No, you didn't do anything wrong. But I need to keep digging until I find out more about the kind of demon Velvet is.
Okay, so can you two pitch me on Patty? And if it's just a gameplay thing, that's okay, because I can understand that her gameplay is very fun, but like I feel like I ended up appreciating what they were trying to do with her as a character, but I also feel like I had more trouble buying into her when all was said and done than I wanted to. So like, especially if you two really appreciate Patty, I would love to hear your perspectives on her and what you appreciate about her. Well, the good news, Grail, is it's always sitting there on YouTube if you ever do want to catch up. But you know that they're not as fun because you weren't there. And as the current regular of our audience, that makes a difference. Yeah, that's fair. It is a very fun and also unusual style of gameplay for a Tales game, so I can appreciate that, definitely. Gambling is fun. That's right. They took the slot machines from the casinos and turned them into a character. That's all you need to know, I guess.
Incredible.
A new species is usually named after the person who discovered it. The Laphicet rhinoceros beetle, then?
Rhinoceros beetle? Whoa, now, that's a stag beetle if I ever saw one.
No. Those things may look like pincers, but they're actually horns. A three-horned beetle will cause quite a stir in the bug community.
Hey, I know pincers when I see them, and those were some mighty pincers. The Laphicet stag beetle has a better ring to it, right?
What part of that sounds better?
The whole thing. Stag beetles are the strongest after all.
Well, when you put it that way, pottery breaking.
The rhinoceros is the king of beetle.
Now I want to replay the entire definitive edition just with Patty.
That doesn't help your case at all.
Rokuro, Eizen, I feel like a dangerous storm going.
The rhino is a one-trick pony with its horn, but a stag can cut its opponents in half.
I just love how quickly they developed rapport, Rokuro and Aizen.
Is a true swordsman.
That's petty trickery.
I feel like this is the old Step Brothers gag of, did we just become best friends? Yup!
But they only live for a year.
Like from the first moment they were together, they had this back and forth.
Die young. Is the beauty of such a life lost on you?
Why is it that boys get so excited when they talk about bugs?
Rhinoceros, stag, or butterfly. All no matter to me.
They all look like cockroaches.
They're totally different.
So, what will you name it? I think Rhino-Stagros for now.
Yeah, Grail has been saying the same thing about Rokuro pottery breaking. Because I think it was in the last stream. Did I not get out of this dungeon? Oh, I see. It warped us, but not that far. That's annoying. It didn't actually take us all the way out of the dungeon. Well, that's all right. Yeah, we were talking on the last stream anyway about how like they literally reference the Bushido code when they're talking about Rokuro, which, as you say about it just kind of feeling incongruous with the world, like the Bushido code is interesting, really great to tell stories about it, but in a fantasy world that doesn't have any, obvious connection between its world and history and stuff like Japanese history or samurai culture, kind of weird to have this concept introduced like the Bushido code. It feels kind of, I agree with you, just kind of incongruous and out of place.
Salatoma flowers smell so sweet, like raspberries.
Let me smell. Oh, they smell tasty.
Do they really taste that bad?
Oh my god, Dark Turtles. Grail, you trying to give me acid flashbacks on the stream? You're playing a dangerous game, my friend.
Transforms into something dreadful.
Dreadful like how?
The petals melt into a liquid thousands of times stronger than mint, and the leaves and stem taste richer than the richest beef tongue. The two flavors clash and fizz on your tongue, and your whole body is racked with choking pain.
What?
Seriously?
That's what Aifread told me anyway.
And Eifread wouldn't lie.
Actually true.
There you go.
That's exactly what it's like.
You've tasted it before, haven't you? Is there any way around it?
You can squeeze it, boil it, mix it with honey, but nothing gets rid of the taste. Trying to mix it.
I still blame Grail for that, for the record, pottery breaking, because Grail was the one who said, oh, don't worry, once you get him down below 10k HP, there's no way he would use his mystic art again. And for some reason, I believed him.
I simply cannot be the first to drink it when others
Which in hindsight is not a thing that a seasoned Tales player should believe. There's just no logic to that at all, so Grail's fault.
Are you certain?
Quit being so stubborn. It'd be better if you just got it over with.
And you've taken your dose?
No, I don't need to. Having a tethered Malak drink it is enough to absorb its effects.
But to a Moloch, it tastes...
Yes, the cuter you are, the worse it tastes. It's good to be an exorcist, eh, Eleanor? Do I have to drink it?
Of course not. I'll suffer through my own dose of Salatoma.
Well, poo. How dull. Whew.
I feel like every Tales game has a cheat button for their enemies in its own special way. That's part of the fun, right? They all figure out how to get the better of you, but it's never quite the same and therefore never quite predictable between any two games.
Don't get overconfident.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, pottery breaking. I feel kind of two minds about that too, because on the one hand, like, I find myself enjoying moments where those kind of joke species or character types are introduced into the main story. Like, I talked about this in my Symphonia stream, but I was really surprised and moved by the whole Cat's questline that leads to Genus's unique Cat's costume, because I had forgotten how resonant it is in terms of the themes of discrimination and finding your place in the world and overcoming the resentment of other people, like everything that's core to Genus's character. And for all of that to come out of, thinking about the cats, like how unusual and how interesting. So I really appreciated that. But then on the other hand, like what you said about the turtles being everywhere in the world, I feel that. I feel the same way kind of about the cats playing such a core role in Dawn of the New World, where they have those stalls everywhere and you actually have to like put time and effort into cooking mechanics and cats in order to cultivate your monsters. That makes it a little harder to kind of triangulate their sense of identity with the overall world and story that's being told. So I feel like it's a fine line to walk in the different games and their different species that they're playing with. Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's great when they do, but I think it's the exception rather than the rule.
His target's probably Loringen, but stay sharp just in case. He might try to break open the bug cage as a diversion.
Wanted Moloch? Loringen?
First that demon wrecks Helavis, and then Eleanor betrays us? We're never gonna catch a break.
Quit whining. Cleaning up messes is our job.
Looks like our Abbey buddies are up to something.
Yeah, that's going to be the next Radiant mythology that we get, right, Grail? Just purely joke species. Cats versus cows versus
Maybe we
turtles.
should make our exit while we can.
Oh, is it established in the games that the turtles are actually just people in outfits? I know that must be in one of the ones I haven't played yet, because I assumed they were just like the cats and cows and antlions in terms of being weird species unto themselves. You know, the way game development is going, I would not be that surprised if we ended up getting one in one of the next few games. Especially if they... I think it would actually be kind of cool and interesting if they went in the bold direction of like going back to truly optional main characters, like some of the earlier games did. And then if they made one of those a joke character, I think they could pull that off in a way that was interesting and not totally ham-fisted. Oh, I see what you're saying, Grail. Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of degrees, though, right? I mean, when humanoid cats and cows are the metric for normalcy, I don't know how far that goes. I mean, you say that, pottery breaking, but I don't think any of these fellows we're talking about could take the place of a Mew or a Noish or a Rapide.
I won't improve.
So I think there's a middle ground. Sometimes you can get a mascot who hits just right and is chef's kiss for the game. Oh my god, and I'll tell you one thing that I did forget about Arise, and I will say it in as vague terms as possible so that it's not, Mongo spoilers for people who haven't played the game. But the fact that during your first real confrontation with the gentleman who has a very long sword, the fact that Hootle, of all the characters in the party, is the first one to really stand up to him, like... Oh my god, I was so much more like emotionally moved by that this time around than I remember being the first time. Like, oh, yeah, they really went a cut above with Hootle across the board. I got a lot of love for that little fella. Yeah, that's right. Tales Sephiroth, exactly. Well, listen, pottery breaking. Like I said before, we're trying to give everything a fair shake as we go through these streams. So I'm not going to extol his virtues now, but I will say I'm trying to keep an open mind about Bienfu. That's as far as I'm willing to go at this moment in Berseria. But it's early days in the story still. He's only recently been introduced. We have to give him the opportunity to redeem himself from our preconceived notions of him. But he has some ways to go, I'll give you that. My man! Speaking of people who don't need to redeem themselves.
Time to spar today. Got a date lined up.
That artifact you've got belongs to Aifread. Why do you have it?
Just picked it up off the ground somewhere.
Don't screw with me, tough guy. I have ways of making you talk.
I wonder how much pain gets you to open up.
You're the one about to be tested.
It's not up to you how this goes. If I want to talk, we'll talk. And if I want to fight, we'll fight.
What are you?
No, Grail. We're patient on this stream. We think in slow motion, whether you like it or not.
More, but I don't want to keep old Pointybeard waiting. We'll chat some more later, with our fists. Wait!
Eizen!
I think your better Zaveid joke in my book, Grail, is that he's tropical Sephiroth. Speaking of Sephiroth.
Let's head back, Laffy said.
But Persona never really gets old either.
All right.
Always be on guard.
What do we want to call that pottery breaking? Sephiroth Soprano on vacation in Hawaii? Does that cover all the bases? Got Mobster Sephiroth Tropical Edition. Yeah, it's more like Crisis Core Sephiroth, you know? Like, Sephiroth was still dressed the same in Crisis Core, but he was more of like, you know, everyday average guy vibe. Like, yeah, I'm a hero, but I'm just like you. I have friends and ambitions besides just being a vessel for my alien mom. Man, do you ever have video game music that just lives in your head rent-free and bubbles up for no discernible reason? I say Crisis Core, and I'm reminded that that literally actually happened to me earlier today, where I was just making lunch, and one of the core themes that plays a big role in the end of the game just came alive in my head. And I felt so unexpectedly moved. It was a moving sandwich, that lunch.
What do you think that was?
From the sound of it, it seemed to belong to Aifread.
I've never seen any object or art quite like it.
Oh my god, pottery breaking. You say the Dawngress theme, and like, what is it about that theme? Because I didn't even have that vivid a memory of Vesperia in my head when I sat down to play the definitive edition again. But so much of that music was so memorable to me. And Dawngress, it was like, the minute we showed up there the first time, I was saying to myself, oh my god, this music! And I was like, I wouldn't even say it's one of my favorite songs in all of video game town music, but there's something about it that just sticks to the inside of your brain.
Maybe it's that
Yeah,
relic
I would
we
100%
brought
agree
from
with
a
that.
continent across the sea. An art from another continent. Do you think Eizen will be all right?
That Moloch seemed to know what he was doing.
There you go, Grail, so you feel
Rather
me.
we just stayed out of his way.
I like that this is a ubiquitous gamer experience, at least among JRPG players.
After anyway.
He was probably just making up that date business. But still, old pointy beard?
Just like Eifread. When I was talking with Benwick, he said Eifread had a pointy beard.
LOL at Eleanor thinking that Zaveid is making up that he has a date.
Then I bet Zaveid is that wanted Moloch the Abbey's
Oh,
looking
Eleanor, if only you knew.
Yeah, he must be aware they're after him. And then he baited Eizen into following him, using something that belonged to Aifread.
And I'm pretty sure Eizen knew that, but he went after him all the same. Ugh, this can only go well, I'm sure.
Is Eizen in trouble?
It doesn't matter either way, if his Corsair Scourge goes untreated. For now, let's get back to the ship.
We could play them through on the stream if you're into it, pottery breaking. They're both still on my list. And as you've probably heard me say in the recordings in the past, Zillia is one that I've tried more than once to play through, and I've never made it all the way through. But I have them both. They're on my shelf, and I'm intending to go through them with the rest of the Tales series. So if you're into that, we could definitely slot it into the stream down the line. Yeah, I feel like part of the fun of Tales of Praxis for me so far has been, like, as I've gone through stuff like Dawn of the New World and Vesperia, as much as I've been rethinking it as an adult, also just trying to answer that question that you just posed in my own head. Like, why didn't I quite vibe with this game as a kid? Like, what was it that put me off of it a little bit if I didn't really vividly understand that? Because oftentimes it's not super clear, but I think if you do find a way to answer that question, it can give you a better like understanding of and way into the game, and also of, you know, yourself and the way that you think about games.
Look! A frog!
It's unusual to see one this close to the sea.
Hey, I thought of a poem! Day at Port Renede. A frog jumps into the void. The sound of the sea. Magilu?
What was that?
I'm obviously biased, but I do feel like, especially the more I've gotten into the series as an adult, like every single one of these games I think is worth a first, second, and third chance. Because even if they're not all your favorite, I do really firmly feel as though they're I can't focus over Magilu. I do feel like they all have something that they're really making an effort to say, and it's something that's interesting. And so I feel like they're at least worth giving the time of day to try to dig in and understand, like, well, why is this something that's worth thinking about? How do I feel about it? It's not always easy to do, but I've always felt rewarded on the other side for taking the time to do that, even with the ones that don't come as naturally to me.
Died. Do not give up hope. I guess that one is about rooting for a frog? That's right. I once bet a fortune on a game of chance involving frogs. That was my inspiration for this one. What do you think? Poetic, isn't it?
I think you have a gambling problem.
So, did this skinny frog win? Nope. I lost my entire bet.
I think we can call that poetic justice.
Gaga going. Got her. Yep, as I expected, you totally broke my brain pointing out that Magilu is voiced by the same voice actress who voices Shion, because they're such wildly different characters. I am never going to recover from that insight. I don't know what to do with it. It's hurting me on the inside. I feel like something has broken. Help me. Pithy insight, Cradle. Yes, exactly. And that is the only true way to talk about video games. He said, sarcastically, we only actually endorse productive and interesting conversation about games here with A Terrible Fate. Except when we're riffing on the stream. Well, you'll make me try, Grail, won't you? Yeah, I feel you, Pottery Breaking. I mean, you know, you saw me wrestle with this in Dawn of the New World, because I do think that's part of what makes it a really uncomfortable experience after Tales of Symphonia, because there is such a wide variety of different characters who are intricately related to each other and the world and the main plot in really compelling ways in Symphonia, and then you kind of have the opposite in Dawn of the New World. But I do feel like, you know, I think so much of games is, you know, having a fun time and good experience with their gameplay, but I also think so much of game story playing, like any kind of good art, is the stuff that makes you uncomfortable, because that's what really makes you think about your experiences with it and challenges you to reconsider stuff. And I do feel like after this most recent playthrough of Dawn of the New World, that kind of thing where the party and the core relationship is so dramatically different from Symphonia is the kind of thing that wants you as the player who also played Symphonia to feel uncomfortable and think about, well, why is this relationship so different? And what am I, as someone who went through all of the relationship mechanics of Symphonia, what am I supposed to do with that? But yeah, I get your point. It's not a comfortable thing, definitely. Yeah, and that's the joy of the games. It's never too late to go back. It does get harder to get them sometimes, which is why I am increasingly leaning into just amassing physical copies of the games I care about as I get older. It's one of the reasons I love going to stuff like PAX, because they always have great physical vendors of retro games there. That's where I picked up Tales of Destiny, actually. But yeah, nice to be able to revisit them from a fresh perspective as you get older.
Drink up.
You've saved us! But where's the first mate?
We bumped into some wannabe tough guy Moloch, and he just took off after him.
I feel that. I actually had to buy a new PS3 to get ready to do Zilia and Graces, because my old one was busto.
With the Corsair Scourge?
Thankfully, they're still really cheap.
Eizen's the one in danger.
Like, you can get a refurbished one
Because the
for
Abbey is
like
after Zaveid.
$60 or something.
You even knew about it. I
Not
heard
bad.
the details from a merchant who deals with the Abbey. Some big shot exorcist named Melchior has set up a trap for Zaveid and Loringen. If Eizen gets caught up in that, he might not make it out alive.
So now there's Melchior to worry about.
Why is Lord Melchior assuming direct command to capture Zaveid? Wait, that's not important. What matters is I can turn Laufey's head over to him and finally return to the Abbey.
Melchior is a legate. A powerful enemy, trap or no.
You guys are useless. Well, fine.
Yeah, I got yellow light of death on my old one, which I was able to fix a few times by basically hotboxing it with a blow dryer, but that only lasts for so long.
What?
We want to save him. Maybe we'll lose. It still won't stop us. We are the ones who decide our fates. Only us. That's just the creed of Aifread's pirates.
You're a real hothead, you know that? Nobody said anything about not helping Eizen.
Huh?
You all stay here, take your medicine like good little boys, and be ready to welcome back your first mate and captain.
The captain?
Why else would Eizen knowingly barge into a trap, if not to save Aifread?
Of course! Leave the ship and crew to me.
Oh, Velvet, you're so smart.
Here, this one's for you.
Those pirates haven't a lick of sense in them.
They don't let reason dictate who they protect.
If you say so, Demon.
Excellent. Yeah, Grail, you probably know this in reference to your comment about the different like follow-up games. And I think I mentioned it during my playthrough of Dawn of the New World, but something that was interesting to me, which I didn't know until I was doing research for my article on Tales of the Abyss, because it had the same creative director as Tales of Symphonia. But I guess the director said when it came to Dawn of the New World, they had actually been interested in, as a team, in doing like a story that was in the further future and did focus on like a different cast of characters in a different moment in the game's world. And it was actually like the powers that be at Namco who wanted them to create something that was just a few years later, with reference to and involvement of the former cast, which I thought was kind of interesting and made me wonder, like, well, if we had gotten a game that was like a sequel and follow-up, but was more in the spirit of, as you say, something like Berseria that is not as directly focused on the main cast, what might that have looked like? I thought that was interesting. Well, they changed it. I think Dawn of the New World is interesting and worthwhile, but it's definitely it's different than another story that could have been, at least. And we do have something that's in the further future of the world. We have Fantasia. It's obviously not quite the same thing that we're talking about as what could have been. Yeah, that counts as Eleanor L number 9. Absolutely. Whoa, pottery breaking. Yeah, tell me more about like how you think about it in that way, because that is not a comparison that I would naturally make, but I'm really interested to hear where you're coming from on that.
Now, about where Eizen's headed.
Those exorcists were talking about some place called Loringen.
Yes, it's a tower in the northern part
Hey,
of West
Stencinator,
where the
welcome.
exorcist train.
Lines up with what Benwick told us. That must be the place.
There must be a lot of exorcists. Hang in there, Eizen.
That'll take more than basic exorcists to do him in.
We ought to pity any poor exorcists who meet the Reaper.
Right. Let's work
Perhaps we
together
ought to
and
find a
find
way,
them.
maybe in song, to let them know that they should not fear the Reaper. Hey, we made it over an hour before my first dad joke. That's something.
Great. Let's do this one run get you style, guys.
1W is still one more than I expect at this point, so I'll take it.
This recipe looks real tasty.
Oh, new recipe. Me love it. Oh, I didn't read the description of the new area that we found, the Barbatos Archipelago. This is the homeland of a clan of warriors who obstinately refuse to use items in battle. Okay, this one, hilariously, I only know from the cameo fights in Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition that this one is an allusion to Tales of Destiny 2. But I do know that, just because I got punished for using items in that fight. Their fighting style is crude, take me to, but overwhelming, and they are highly valued as mercenaries. Love it. Yeah, I had a laugh in that fight at least, Grail, because I went through the first time, and I think I was just using repeat, so I didn't use any items because I'd been maining him the whole game. And then I think I went through it with Rita, where I very clearly needed to use items. And the first time through, I was like, man, it's weird that he's not popping a Mystic Art. And then the next time through with Rita, I was like, oh, that's why. So it was a laugh, though. I had a lot of fun with it. I have to take a second to read Pottery Breaking's thought because I'm interested in it. Yeah, that's really interesting, Pottery Breaking. I will, I'll have to think more about that. It's interesting to me, and one of the reasons that I grabbed onto you saying that was one of the, like, sort of spiritual connections that I've been thinking about, which is very different than that with Vesperia, was I wanted to tease out, and I still might spend some time thinking about this, like, is there a way to read it as kind of a spiritual precursor to Symphonia? Because in a certain sense, right, the world that you encounter Terca Lumeres in Vesperia is like something of a primordial precursor to the world of Symphonia, where, you know, you have the air, which is more like elementally foundational than mana, and then by the end of the game, they like develop the whole like scientific and metaphysical foundations of mana as like the way to formulate a new world, and they bring summon spirits into it and everything like that. So I find myself wondering a little bit, like, is there a way to tell an interesting like story with thematic continuity going from like the lessons of Vesperia to something like the lessons of Symphonia, and maybe even Dawn of the New World beyond that. I've been thinking more about Tales of Abyss, if anything, in line with Tales of Destiny, because they have similar, like, I don't know how similar their themes are. I still want to think about that, but their world structure in terms of like the different layering of the world is very similar. And I don't want to spoil too much of that because I know you haven't played Destiny, but that's a really interesting thought. I'm definitely going to have to think more about that. Yeah, absolutely. Pottery Breaking. Actually, I had a lot of fun just with those as Easter eggs. I hadn't probed it more in terms of like how might that actually unite the worlds or create continuity between the story, but I think that's great reason to think about it. The synthesis items that you call out, I was super stoked when I found the one that was like fragment of hyper resonance. Like, are you kidding? That's awesome. Oh, Grail, if only you could type and I could talk, we would be a great advertisement for Bandai Namco's Tales series. Obviously, I'm just roasting you. Yeah, Stencinator, it's a pleasure to have you. I imagine you've been on the stream before, right? I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember you, but it's a pleasure to have you back because it didn't look like you were a first-time chatter. But yes, this is the real-life JRPG party working through the Tales games. So if you're a fan of great video game storytelling or experiencing some new JRPGs or anything in between, you've come to the right place. With a cozy quorum of conversationalists tonight. Oh yeah, and I mean, you should know this about me at this point, Pottery Breaking. I am also the last person to say, like, oh, this is only an Easter egg, therefore you can't think about it further. So I would say, for my part, it is more than valid to push further and ask, like, okay, given that these items from the other world are here, what sense can we make of the continuity of their worlds, and what might they be trying to say in conversation with one another? So yeah, we should think more about that. I'm definitely going to be reflecting on that as I grind through Arise after this. So maybe you could come back on Friday and we can chat a bit more about it at that point. I would really love that.
Solitoma is as awful as I remember. I'd hoped I'd never have to drink it again.
Are you alright, Eleanor?
Is this your second experience with the Corsair?
Well, what dialogue are you talking about, Grail? Do you mean like stuff that's like in the ROM but they didn't use in the final game or something? Because I don't remember anything like that.
Sounds like hazing to me.
When everyone shares the same experience, drinking something so shockingly revolting, our bonds are strengthened. It's a good thing.
If you say so.
I really did believe I'd never have to taste it again. To be blunt, I hate it.
You're lucky you think it tastes so terrible.
Yeah, what
That means
Nordopolica
you
Easter
also
egg are
know
you
what
guys talking
tastes
about?
good.
I want to go fire up the
Right,
game and find it
Velvet.
now.
What does that mean?
Velvet can't taste anything aside from blood.
What? Is that because she's a demon?
I'm aware of one other flavor. Mogulu, here's your dose of solitoma.
Brutal.
No!
Get back here!
Don't! Keep that salad away from me!
Oh, got it, Stensnayer. That makes sense. Yeah, that was such a fun interview. I'm really glad that you enjoyed that.
The sweet taste of another suffering.
The main thing that we're doing streaming-wise right now is not interviews like that, but this Tales of Praxis series, which is really just focused on the Tales games. But I loved doing that interview. It was really the brainchild of Camus, the other analyst for With a Terrible Fate, who did it with me. But we love creating opportunities like that to talk with other interesting thinkers in gaming about their work. So if there's ever anyone else you'd be interested in us talking to or interviewing or inviting on the stream, definitely feel free to reach out, hit us up, give recommendations, because I'd love to use the stream and With a Terrible Fate more broadly as a venue for doing more stuff like that. Every time we do interviews with people, it's always a huge amount of fun. All right, Grail. Well, I'm going to be hunting behind signs after this, so thank you for giving me a reason to fire up Tales of Vesperia yet again. Ay, ay, ay. Well, it's like any good JRPG, real or fictional, Grail, right? You stay with it for enough hours and everything comes together. It only gradually builds and gets more complicated in the best of ways. Okay, thank you for the guidance also, Pottery Breaking. I will absolutely check that out. That sounds super cool. And all the more reason, like, especially with something like that then, even beyond like the Easter egg-ish synthesis items, that makes me feel like the game really wants you to think about it in conversation with Tales of the Abyss, which I had not spent a single moment thinking about, so
Why does it seem
that'll
like
be a fun
everyone around
project.
me is completely mad.
Yeah! Continuing to fight when you know you'll lose just is insane!
Would you stand around and watch your comrade die just because you're scared?
I wouldn't want to, but getting myself killed wouldn't save anyone either.
Yes, it would be illogical to fight.
Is being illogical really that bad?
That is literally the only thing Artorias cares
Everyone
about, so
experienced
yes.
pain? I remember Velvet standing, despite the horrible pain she felt. Rokuro is training with all his heart in order to defeat his brother Shigure. And Kurogane used up his own head to forge a powerful blade.
None of that is very logical.
Yeah, I don't know quite how to put it, but I think it's all amazing.
Aren't you forgetting someone?
Magilu is traveling with us, even though she doesn't care. And that...
Yes, go on.
I don't really understand what that's about. Miss Magilu, hang in there!
Well, it is amazing in some sense, I suppose.
Boy, that's a really interesting comparison to me between Doth and Dawngrest Pottery Breaking, because on the face of it, I would think of them as really wildly different from each other, just in the sense that Doth is basically Vatican City in terms of being organized around the world religion and being this kind of singular authoritarian seat of power, whereas, gosh, I mean, in some sense at least, Dawngrest is kind of like Kaitsur in terms of being its like independent place where there's a bunch of different people, in Vesperia in terms of guilds, in Kaitsur in the sense of it being a border town that kind of legislates of its own accord. But yeah, especially given that difference between them, it's interesting that, as you point out, they serve very structurally similar roles in the different games. I hadn't thought about that. Grail, I wonder what you mean in terms of them being structured in the same way. Because, like, I mean, beyond the question of like reshaping the world, which feels like a very general thing to say about the structure. I feel like, to me at least, a lot of it scans as very different, especially since, as we've talked about in the past, like Tales of the Abyss is all structured around like the personal growth of its protagonist, Luke, whereas like, as we've talked about in terms of Tales of Vesperia, not necessarily that you have to call it an anti-JRPG, but it's much less about the development and personal insight of any single character and more about like figuring out what it is to act as an individual within a group context. So you could see similarities between them, but I struggle to see them as structurally the same, unless you mean something different by that, which you probably do. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, I guess the actual third act of both games does start with the gang getting back together after a big climax, so that makes sense. I think for me, at least right now, in terms of how much I've thought about Abyss versus Vesperia, it's easier for me to see Abyss as something that has a clear first, second, and third act, where like the first confrontation with Van really doesn't feel like an anticlimax to me in the sense of it being like a first of two third acts. But I can see where you're coming from there. That's fair.
Hello there. You're headed to Loringen Tower too? Just a bit ago, a brawny, silver-haired man asked me how to get there.
Did he say why he was going there?
Something about meeting some friends of his. Exorcists use that tower to...
I also don't know that I would buy into saying it's obviously Yuri's game, Grail. Like, I get the point that it's focalized through him, but especially replaying it this time around, I don't feel like I got very far reading the game through him. And I don't know that the game wants you to do that, at least in terms of the way I sat with it.
No clue.
So he was planning on us following him. What's he scheming?
Stensnator, yeah, interesting question, especially since we've been spending a lot of time talking about what the heck is a JRPG in the first place. So when you ask, like, when you say that part of the game feels similar to Xenoblade Chronicles, like, can you say a little more about what parts of it feel similar to you? Because then it'll be much easier to diagnose and talk about, like, whether that's something that's particular to these games or general to JRPGs or something in the middle.
Or the Abbey.
Both.
Loringen Tower lies beyond the Burnak Plateau. Blah! If you're gonna set up an obvious trap, couldn't it at least be someplace more convenient?
That's what I'm saying. Let us quick jump there or something. All right, off on an adventure, friends. Yeah, I agree with that pottery breaking. I think, to me, part of how I'm thinking about it this time around as I'm sitting down to analyze and write about it in conversation with Tales of Destiny is, I think, a major cipher to the game in terms of making sense of its story for me is the fact that the final confrontation with Duke is structured in such a way that it is like a radically different confrontation based on which of the party members you have as your leading party member. I don't think that's just like an interesting different experiment or choice lever that they pulled. I think it says a lot about the structure of the role that the different characters play in the overall ecosystem of the story. So I want to think about that more. Because really, I mean, we kind of half joked about this, half seriously talked about it across previous entries in the stream. Like, I mained Repeat in it, mostly because I love my dog so freaking much, and it was cool to be able to honestly play through it with her by my side while I was controlling a dog. That was fucking cool. But I really, at the end of that first playthrough, before I went back and did all of the other stuff and played through that final confrontation with the other characters, like, it really kind of felt like Repeat's story, and not in like a forced way or a contrived way, but in a way that really was meaningful and felt coherent to me. So I think it's worth taking the time to think about how is it that they do that and what point might they be trying to make. 2 barks, exactly. You get it, Grail. Exactly that. I think it's Repeat's game, and this is my justification for that. Ruff! Ruff!
wrong, Laphicet?
I was just wondering why Eizen and Zaveid can't work together to find Aifread.
All men their age care about is their reputation, their street cred. Such a hassle.
Oh, really?
What are your two minds, pottery breaking?
Fully deny it.
The same could be said of women, and of everyone, really. It's hard to work alongside someone unless you strive to understand their thoughts and feelings.
And if you can't?
Well,
It's like Zaveid said. You start talking with your fists instead.
I summoned my actual dog underneath my desk with my barks, by the way, if anyone was curious. Stensnator, yeah, that's a great point, and don't worry about not saying that in your first comment either. Yeah, I think what I would say for my part, and I'm sure the gang has their own opinions on this, is I think there is sort of a common language in terms of like typical tropes or even like types of gameplay loops that you get in your average JRPG. So I think, as you say, stuff like, you know, having a complicated party system with multiple party members, a complicated combat system that involves like 4 or more party members, or a bunch of side quests or even little parts of the story that are organized around going to certain places and getting certain items. Like, I think those are all things that, you know, you might not get in other games as much as you get in JRPGs. So there's certainly going to be a lot of variation, and that's a big part of, you know, what we've been enjoying in this Tales of Praxis series, is looking at, even within Namco's Tales series of JRPGs, how they treat those little things a little bit differently. But I think you are definitely picking up on things that are, broadly speaking, characteristic of like how JRPGs are organized and put together. Yeah, and exactly to my point, Grail is already diving into some of the more fine-grained nuances about the differences between them in the chat. So I think that's all totally fair. Yeah, pottery breaking, just to follow up on your much earlier comment at the top of the stream, by the way, I am definitely not regretting asking you any questions. I love how involved and in-depth you're getting, so don't back down. That's my favorite kind of conversation, and thank you for contributing it. I will ask, like, because I know this is a hell of a side quest, and I think it's totally fair that not everyone takes the time to do it. Have you like taken the time to do the full playthrough of Rapid's like side quest against his rival? Because I really did feel like between that and even the conclusion of the quest to get all the Gigantos monsters and how you learn about Rapid's past, like I found myself walking away from his side content like more satisfied than I expected in terms of the way he was fleshed out and the contributions he made to the story. But I will say, and I think this is part of the magic of Vesperia, I think a lot of that is because I was like emotionally invested and bought into him in the first place. And I have to imagine, like, if I felt that way about Rita or Judith, I think you could probably say similar things about most of their side content in the game. Yeah, so didn't you feel like, not even the conclusion of the dog map, but especially just like I think back to, I'm gonna say this and then I'm gonna stop talking for a sec so we can actually advance and fight this Code Red demon and everything. Just that scene, I still remember, like, between Rapid and his rival in Dawngrest, where they're talking about like debating basically the nature of the right relationship for beasts to have with humans in the world. Like, I just remember being so moved by that as like a really unexpected microcosm of really a lot of what I felt the whole game was about, and even like articulating it in some sense, like in a clearer and more compelling way to me than even the final confrontation with Duke does at first blush, which is probably, you know, unfair upon reflection, but pre-analytically, that was how I felt about it. So I get what you're saying, and I also get that you say the positive side wins out, so I think at the end of the day, we're on the same side. But I was like, just as someone who was very bearish on Rapid, no animal pun intended, going into the game, I was really like pleasantly surprised with the amount of richness and depth they gave to him. Like, it was very clear to me they didn't just add a dog character for the sake of it and leave it at that. She's the everything girl, Grail. You and I know this. Come on. Call a spade a spade. Oh, we can call her Spade Girl. There we go. That is very fair, pottery breaking. Yeah, I think especially if you're focusing on the main content or looking for that to be realized in the main content, I think Rapide does fall into the category of one of the characters where you have to work the hardest to see the contributions he has to the main story. Kind of like Patty, right? I mean, I get that she's kind of a DLC character, but I really feel like, you know, one of the things that I want to think about in my study of Vesperia is the we might not be prepared for this because this guy seems pretty brutal. Well, to finish my thought, Necropolis of Nostalgia, I think, really cool and interesting addition to the story, adds a lot, also totally optional. Also, I think that's part of what makes it work. But it's also part of what makes you have to work for it outside of the main story. So I totally get that. All right, we might be fucked, my friends. This is where I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. But let's see, we might be able to recover here. I love that observation so much, pottery breaking. I'll tell you also, one of my favorite moments in terms of the gameplay, because actually as we're talking about it, I think Vesperia has a number of really cool moments like this. We talked about Raven's Mystic Art. Another one like that is Rapide's Mystic Art, where the first time he uses it, it literally doesn't have a name because he just barks and he can't declare its name the way other characters can. And then there's a whole skit where the characters are debating what they should call it, and that's how it gets its name. Like, oh, that's so cool. And just, especially as someone who spends a lot of time with his dog and thinking about his dog, like it really resonated with me as a dog person. So there are a lot of little moments like that in his gameplay. I hadn't even really thought about the way he like learned arts from Flynn and Yuri, but that totally tracks. I love that observation. Slash, thank you. Yes, I didn't want to misquote the name because I couldn't think of it. Because Raven thinks of some like hilariously ludicrous and fancy name for it beforehand, and they're like, "No, come on, man, it's a Slash. We should just call it Slash." Grail, I think you had a typo. What you meant is Slash is the best move of all time. Period. No comparison. No questions asked. I will not explain myself any more than I have.
I need to be careful not to misuse my power.
Boy, I really thought we were going to get our asses handed to us in that battle, but we turned it around. God bless. Yeah, and Sensinator, I do think to Grail's point, I would totally agree with, like, especially if you're first getting into JRPGs and thinking about how to navigate them and the ways in which they're different. I mean, there are a ton of different dimensions along which they vary from each other, but one, which Grail points out, which I think is totally fair, is the difference between kind of what you would call real-time combat, something like you're getting here in the Tales series, versus something that's more turn-based, like older school iterations of Final Fantasy, or I would say Xenoblade Chronicles kind of sits in the middle of those, so it's kind of a useful model for what a hybrid would look like. And then the other dimension that I think is kind of similarly easy to track is the difference between like a big open world JRPG, something like a Xenoblade Chronicles, where there's just a ton to do and a million dimensions and things to explore, and it takes a lot more time as a result of that, as opposed to something that's more linear and self-contained, like, what's a good example of that? I guess OG Final Fantasy VII. I mean, that's relatively linear. Its world still has a lot to explore, but it feels more like a path as opposed to, well, honestly, probably what we'll be getting with Rebirth. Yeah, that's not the best example. That's maybe Final Fantasy 13 is a better example. Everyone called that a hallway, and that's basically the reason.
Whoa! Hot water is spouting out of the mountain.
And look at those rainbows.
This is one of the 7 wonders of the world, the Burnak Geyser.
Yeah, I really like the conversation. I think it's in a skit, pottery breaking, to your point, but like Yuri and Flynn have a whole conversation about sort of the different styles that they use for the same arts, and how Yuri's is kind of a deviation from it that's not especially knightly. So again, talk about the ways that they weave the characterization into the gameplay. I love that.
Additionally, the groundwater veins that feed this geyser are connected to the sea. Because of this, every now and then a boiled octopus or crab will shoot out from the geyser.
No way. That's impossible. Well, not impossible, but
With the salt content of the geyser's water, I bet they're seasoned to perfection.
Mogulu, I'm declaring your bizarre imagination the 8th wonder of the world.
I think that's reasonable,
People say
Billy.
that all the time.
Okay, so we're going to do two things. First, I'm going to answer Stencinator's comment, and then Grail, we're going to make the real-life JRPG party even more interactive, because you can tell me how to map Eleanor's arts, and I will listen to you, because I want to see how you play it, and I know you know more about this combat system than I do. 8 Ways to Sunday. Stencinator, I think it's definitely a matter of personal preference in terms of like how you get into the combat systems. I would say like, and this might not be quite what you're saying. You might just be saying you're confused about this one. But I feel like if you enter JRPGs through something that is more turn-based, or even something that's quasi-turn-based or time-limited, like Xenoblade Chronicles, that can be a good way to kind of find your footing before you get to stuff that's kind of more dynamic and action-based like this. If you were asking about how to get into it, and I'm not quite sure that's what you were asking as I look back at it. All right, Grail. Tell me what to put where. Map out her moves for me, and then we'll move on here. Show you what I have right now. We have, well, you probably know. You've probably been keeping track. We have all of these, so give me some movesets. Vanguard, not to be confused with the Silveranti Liberation Front from Dawn of the New World. Or maybe that's a deep lore Easter egg. Who knows? The stream can decide. Okay, so a button for spells. Fantastic. Let's do that for, I don't know, triangle. That feels like it'll jive well with me. This can be a good little quick practicum for you as well, Stencinator, if you're interested in getting one level down in terms of how this gameplay system works. We're actually going to spend some time mapping out the actual actions that a character is taking. I'll also say, even as someone who plays a lot of JRPGs and thinks about a lot of JRPGs, this is a system that is not especially easy for me to wrap my head around and implement. So I think it's, you know, even if you have exposure to a lot of these systems, I would personally say it's fair to be a little disoriented by this one. Okay, so Rending Strike is not a spell, by the way. You started talking about spells and then very quickly moved into physical text, but that's okay. Into Whirling Top. No, but I want to try out what you're doing. That's why if you're playing the character, let me see what movesets you do, and we can try it out. But fine, if you don't want to take my agency, I'll just, I'll set the spells in no particular order to triangle. And then what else did you say combo as well? Rending Strike also goes into Burning Moon. Oh, we have that on Circle. That's fantastic. That's Rolling Top, so we have that already. No, that's okay. This is enough for us to go on, and we can start with this and then and go from there. Boy, so you both think way more about gameplay in this game than I do. That's fun, though. I'm seeing a new perspective from which to engage with this, which is fantastic. We can do Coiling Serpent into Skewering Spear here. And I guess I'll just throw some different ones over here. We haven't done Crushing Drop yet. Nor Double Rush. Nor Vanguard. Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, I appreciate weakness exploitation systems, but it's a lot for me to keep track of within the universe of everything else in the game. I even feel that way about Pokemon. Like, especially with all of the just countless types and different elements and relationships that they have in the more modern games. Like, I literally have to play with a whole grid of the weaknesses and resistances in front of me because I can't keep track of them all in my head. And at that point, it feels sufficiently overwhelming to take me out of it a little bit. Treble Strike is a good move to have at the end. All right, I'll do that, and then we'll move on. Treble Strike! Great. We have a new kit for Eleanor. Let's see how that goes. Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one who feels it pottery breaking. Stensnader, really good question. Actually, for all that everyone has been losing their minds off of Baldur's Gate 3, I have to admit I haven't played any of them, so I will defer to the other members of our real-life JRPG party in case they have insights into how that fits into our conversation about gameplay. I know a lot of people think a lot of it and have a lot of opinions, but it is just, it's so outside my domain of expertise, and it's the last kind of game I'm going to pick up while I'm also managing all of the Tales games for Tales of Praxis. Okay, yeah, that's what I've heard about it, pottery breaking. I've heard only two things about it besides the fact that everyone's obsessed with it and losing their minds. One is that it's like D&D, and the other is that apparently, I guess, a key part of character creation is being able to, like, design and modify the genitalia of your character, which, like, I guess if you really care about character customization, like, there's a sense in which it's strictly speaking good to have more customization than less, but that's, like I said, that was the kind of data about a game that made me feel like maybe it was not quite aimed at me. I mean, honestly, Grail, like, based on what I said about genitalia customization, like, if you're going to do that and then not make an orgy possible, I feel like that would be more surprising than having that customization and an orgy.
Did you get the medicine to the ship's crew?
Yeah.
Good. My thanks to you.
These soldiers won't be happy in the morning, but they're alive. Is this your
Yeah, pottery breaking, I might have to stream Graces because we keep talking about it. I would say it's the one that I remember as a kid besides Symphonia and Abyss having, like, the biggest impact on me. I've said this before on the stream, but actually one of the reasons I wrote what I did about Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was really to be able to make a comment at the end about how that related to Tales of Graces. And it's been too long since I've played it, so I couldn't really explain the mechanics of why this is the case. But my memory is the same as what you just said, where even if it involves weakness exploitation and is more like this system than what you get in Symphonia or Abyss, like, I remember the system as something that made a lot more sense to me and was much more intuitively manageable. So I'd be interested in exploring that with gameplay-minded folks such as yourself.
Oh, they were like this when I got here. It must have been Zaveid.
Well, Grail, you might have just sealed our fate, for better or worse.
The Abbey is going to great
Yeah, that would be a fun one. Yeah, maybe that's what we'll do next. I'll think on
Even
it.
so, he clearly knows he's walking into a trap. What I don't get is why he roped me into all of this. If he didn't want my help, then what need did he have to play the Eifread card on me?
If you knew this was a trap, why did you come?
To see
All
for
right, pod
myself.
rebreaking. Well, we might be coming to a consensus.
When I met Eifread, I was wallowing in despair that I would ever find a way to break the Reaper's curse. Stop denying reality, he told me. If you were really born with that curse, then it's a part of you. But if the Reaper learns to grasp the wheel of his life, even he may find his creed, his path through stormy waters.
Well, and Stensnader, if you didn't catch this at the top of the stream, we're also gearing up to give a like Pokemon plus JRPG plus Tales combo lecture in a couple of weeks. So Pokemon is very on brand for all of this. So you are more than welcome to do that. My hope is it complements that experience well rather than badly.
And so, I joined him aboard the Von Eltia.
A creed of life.
Let's say someone's murdered the captain. If it came as the result of him living life on his terms, I could accept that. But if anyone, and I mean anyone, tries to crush his way of life, I could never forgive them.
Who's there?
It's rude to eavesdrop.
Grail, I'm gonna boot you, bro.
Zaveid, isn't there any way you and Eizen can work together somehow?
Not if he's going to keep acting like this.
Oh, I love them.
Well, that's how it is.
What was the point of all that posturing? He could have just stayed hidden. Weirdo.
Can't disagree there.
Yeah, I don't know whether this is because of what you're talking about as the story simplicity, Grail. Maybe. I'll say, since we spent all that time on the last stream talking about second acts of games, Graces is one of those where I have very, very little memory of most of what happens in the middle of the game, but I find myself oftentimes, even nowadays, going back to and reflecting on the end of the game. Like, it has really stuck with me in a way that is pretty simple, but I think also really emotionally moving for me. And so I think that's a big part of why I am excited to revisit it and talk about it, especially with you all, maybe in a streamed context, to try to give the whole of the game a fair chance and see what it's trying to say when push comes to shove about all of that. This is probably a very obvious observation, but worth keeping in mind also in terms of that scene that we just saw between Eizen and Zaveid. Like, I loved that, especially as we've been talking about coming into this game with the fresh context of Zestiria, because like you could see on his face Zaveid listening to Eizen talking about the value of dying based on the life you chose to live, and like Zaveid learning the exact lessons about what Eizen would want that come to the fore when the time actually comes to kill the Helionized Eizen in Tales of Zestiria. So I love that. They didn't beat you over the head with the continuity or make a big point about it. Maybe because, as we were talking about earlier in the stream, like, we don't have the same characters here, so it's not like there's even an occasion to say, hey, this is thing that happened in past game. But I think it's all the more moving by virtue of its subtlety in that sense, for me at least.
Loringen Tower is a training ground for exorcists, right?
Yes, it's a great edifice built on ancient ruins.
Laphicet, did you ever go there when you were tethered to Teresa?
We are, that's what I'm saying. We gotta dig in now, because I
I
think we're gonna see him in a less flat way as we go
What
forward
sort
here.
of training do they do there?
Exorcists are tested and assigned Malachim equivalent to their aptitude with mana. It's also where they practice Malach arts and study our laws.
So the lower ranks use it as a sparring ground in order to train up to the higher ranks?
No, an exorcist's affinity to mana is not something that strengthens through training. We're given Malachim based on our inborn ability, then learn arts to suit that ability.
So, an orderly is an orderly for life, then?
Correct.
There'd be no spirit of competition then. Don't they want to get stronger, to advance through the ranks?
There'd be no purpose to advancement. rank signifies nothing more than the type and number of molecules.
And so this aptitude, while they don't have the language for it yet, must be the same thing that is referred to in Zestiria as resonance.
How sickeningly noble of you.
I wonder if your wills are suppressed just like those of the molecule you use.
Deviants like you could never possibly understand our motives. In any case, that is who awaits you at Loringen Tower.
So we're in for a rough welcome. I say bring it on.
You know what's interesting? This is another reason that I want to go back to Graces, because I literally don't remember why this was the case, and I want to see if I can decode why young Aaron did this, but I'm almost certain that I got through Act 3 of Tales of Graces and then just didn't bother to do Act 4, which Aaron nowadays would never do. Like, I'm not going to put a game like that down until I am done with it now, but I think I just stopped, and I don't know why. So I want to know why that's the case, and I also want to correct the mistakes of my younger self, like we've talked about in terms of Tales of Legendia too. That's on the list for a similar reason. But yeah, I mean, God, why would you walk away from something like that? Especially when, like I said, Act 3 just hit me so hard in that. Yeah. But that's why we have Tales of Praxis, to be able to revisit that stuff.
We witnessed his unwillingness to kill before, but it seems he's quite serious about it. Maybe that's why I don't feel scared of him. Even when he and Eizen were about to fight, I didn't feel tense at all.
Oh, really, Grail? That's interesting.
That's just because you've been around Velvet a bit.
Kind of all the more interesting, perhaps, because this is a prequel to Zestiria, so I wonder whether that's part of it.
He doesn't come across as
Is it one that's coming up soon, or one that you came across later on in your playthrough?
Just a brawler?
Maybe he's just naive.
Okay, so he's just a naive brawler. He's still involved with Eifread's disappearance, and he's also taking on the Abbey. I just don't get him.
Me neither.
Uh-huh. I agree, but I don't understand any of you either.
Well, Eleanor, by definition, you can't understand them because this party is bound together by resistance to logic and connection through intuition and emotion. Which we haven't discussed in a while, but buckle up, because by the time we get to Act 3, I'm sure that will become a much more immediate part of the conversation.
I don't get it.
Get what?
Why did Aifread let Eizen join his ship?
If you didn't take your philosophy in school, don't worry, because I'm sure by the time we get to the end of this game, it's gonna pull that out of me and into the stream and down your throats. In a good way. That's something to look forward to. Not that I'm threatening you with it.
Knowing he carried the Reaper's curse with him, what good did it do? I just don't see the reason behind it.
Well, if it were me who had that curse, it would mean that you and Velvet could die because of it, right?
Yeah, I suppose so.
If that's the case, then I'd feel like I'd both want to and not want to be close to you two. And I'd probably really, really hate myself.
Yeah, I'm with you, Grail. That's a very funny one.
That's how Eizen feels, but Eifread still took him in. He agreed they put up with the curse.
I liked
together.
that one, especially back in the skit when Eleanor was musing on Velvet's outfit last time.
Like Eifread's a very strong man, at least for a base lawless pirate.
I admire him, begrudgingly. Can we not get down from here? You're really just gonna mock us with that chest? Developers, God will punish you for this. All right, let's see these new movesets in action. Well, we'll see them once Velvet is done doing her thing. Oh yeah, that does flow nicely. Look at you, Grail, giving me good advice. You Tales veteran.
You're not hurt, are you?
No, I'm fine.
I'm ready for this.
Oh, I had literally forgotten that kind of field skill advancement was even part of the navigation in this game, if I'm being honest. Good to know, good to know.
This fight is over.
God will punish me for this.
Eizen, can I ask you about that thing Zaveid had?
It belonged to Aifread, didn't it? I've read much of the Abbey's archives on weaponry, but I've never seen anything like it.
He found it when we crossed to the far continent. It's a relic from a long-vanished civilization. He's like me and can't resist a good treasure. But of everything we've found, that one was his most prized.
Oh, it was a Xenoblade Chronicles 2 joke. That makes much more sense. But see, it says something about this game and how complex a lot of its systems are that even after playing it for so many hours, I was willing to take that on face value and believe you that it was just something that I had not noticed about the game systems yet. I'm putting that one on the game, not on me.
What is it?
I can't say. It seemed like a weapon, but Aifread wouldn't let anyone touch it. He went off and tested it on his own. Then came back all grinning, saying he had an ace up his sleeve the next time we got into a fight.
Then it's definitely some sort of ancient combat device? But why is Zaveid looking for Aifread? To apologize for stealing it?
He doesn't seem like that much of a gentleman.
Did he really steal it?
What do you mean?
It's just my feeling, but Zaveid doesn't seem like the type of Malak to steal something so precious.
He said he just picked it up. Perhaps he's trying to return it.
Perhaps.
Boy, and now knowing that the gun... Do we remember the name of the gun? It's something German, but for the life of me now I can't remember it, even though I loved it at the time. But now knowing that it even comes from like a more ancient civilization than this, it just... it makes the Tales historian inside of me want to probe further into the past to understand, like, well, what was the world like such that a gun like that was developed and what problem was it trying to solve? And I can't remember how deep we get into the history of the world in this one, but I hope we do. We're still relatively early in the story, so I guess there's reason to hold out hope that we might. Siegfried! That's right. Thank you, Grail. That's exactly what it is. In my mind, I was reaching for something more like Götterdämmerung, which is just German, but not at all close to what this is. Yes, thank you too, Pottery Breaking. At least multiple other members of our real-life JRPG party have good memories for proper nouns. Oh my god, I love the attention to names and nomenclature that they have in Tales of Arise, but oh my god, from Orbis Calaglia onward, the amount of difficulty I have keeping all of those names in my head, especially when I'm juggling other JRPGs at the same time, it's like, good luck, Aaron. Oh no, not the Ginnungagap! Anything but the Ginnungagap!
Bothering to hide this trap.
They probably knew we'd sense it. The question now is just what they're planning to spring on.
I know I've talked about this before on the stream. We talked about it briefly back when we were doing Dawn of the New World, but like last stream, we learned while we were navigating a field area the word fen, which is a type of like wetland sustained by groundwater that takes thousands of years to develop. So thank you, Tales, for teaching me about that aspect of ecology. I had never heard that before. And Ginnungagap, as hilarious as it sounds, and I truly believe it's maybe in my top 5 of silliest and most fun words to say. In Norse mythology, the like primordial void before creation happened, in their like mythopoeia of how the world and all of existence came to be, which like talk about being spot on for the role of that in Dawn of the New World storytelling, and talk about being a really cool and thematically coherent way of building Dawn of the New World, its universe, out of the Norse-inspired universe that we get in Tales of Symphonia and Tales of Fantasia. Like that is just awesome. The theming that they do with names in that game, and in most games, if we're being honest. Cislodia, yep. I think that is the most straightforward one. With its capital, the similarly easy to remember Cisloden. The funny, like, bifocal thing about those names is, on the one hand, they're all so hard for, like, a regular human in our world to remember, but on the other hand, like, they put so much care and attention to the internal logic of the names in terms of them all meaning something that's significant and appropriate in the world. And, you know, the way that all of the Renan's names have, you know, these, like, meaningful surnames attached to them, and the way that the Danans don't. So they do put so much thought and care into it, but it's, you know, the kind of thought and care that Tolkien put into making up languages. Like, it doesn't make it easier for humans to keep track of them as they're going through the games. Any favorite quotes on your mind, Grail? That are relatively spoiler-free, I guess, for people who haven't played the games that are on your mind? We've talked to death how quotable they all are. I love that. Yeah, agreed. Pottery breaking. I think it's always useful in that regard when you have, like, some familiarity with the mythos they're drawing from, and with the Western aspects of Zestiria. It makes it all the better. That was a big part of what was fun about my deep dive into Tales of the Abyss, was kind of diving equally deep into Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism in order to kind of use that as a cipher for better excavating the stuff that I think the story is trying to talk about. Like, I think that attention to naming and its relation to the themes and world and everything else of the story is more often than not there. But sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not, just based on what you're familiar with. But, you know, glass half full, that's always incentive to dive in, do a little research, see what it is they're talking about. Chances are, more often than not, you'll find a new way of thinking about the game. God knows I have. Grail, did you really just make a joke that you can't spell Artorias right and spell Artorias correctly in the joke about not being able to spell Artorias? Oh, fuck me. This is, they've renamed it by the time of Zestiria, haven't they? But this is absolutely the town in the desert in Zestiria. I think it's renamed to Logren and I think it's pronounced that way, actually. They've just named it, they've spelled it differently now versus in Zestiria. But yeah, this is where the monument that reads the Iris Gems is, where we confronted Maven and everything else. That's awesome. I think that's the second time we've had that kind of one-to-one correspondence between area with a clear link. The first, of course, being Artorias' throne. Wow. And it's another moment that makes me so happy for having just played Zestiria, because there's no way I would have clocked that the first time I was playing Berseria without Zestiria fresh in my mind. Logren, yes, thank you, Pottery Breaking. Oh, that's a great one, Grail. I love that. Which one is that from? I think that's from one that I've very recently played, because I remember sitting with that line and thinking that's so great, but my God, they're blending together for me a little bit at this point. Yeah, I mean, in a similar vein to what we were discussing earlier this stream, in terms of it really feeling like a prequel that stands on its own 2 feet and contributes something new to the story of Zestiria without running over the same ground. Like, you see that in the characters. I think what you're saying about the topology is right on the mark in that same regard, Pottery Breaking, where, you know, it really feels like it's in the distant past, and so between that and being on different continents, like, so much of the world would be different and is different, but there's enough there to understand, like, yeah, it's believable that the world mythos has as storied and extensive a history as it was propped up to appear in Tales of Zestiria, because look at all these roots. We are discovering some things that clearly still have prominence at the time of Zestiria, and were central even in the time of Berseria. I think that's a really nice balance for the game to have struck. Shut up, Grail. I'm not taking your bait. Maybe on Friday I'll take your bait, but it's too early for that. Is that Grace's? That sounds like Grace's. But again, it's been a minute since I've played through that. Yeah, man, I don't know. I'm starting to think that these JRPGs might be talking about something worthwhile. Maybe I should do a whole fucking series about it. Oh, wait.
When and how did Aifread disappear exactly? And how did you two meet in the first place?
You know, you ask an awful lot of questions about us.
What? I don't mean to pry, really. Perhaps it's a habit I picked up from my work. Drat. It seems I've been digging too hard.
No matter. Aifread vanished about a year ago. He agreed to fight a duel against someone, and secretly left to meet his opponent. Once we figured out what was happening, we rushed to the scene. But all we found was the aftermath of a fight, and a pendulum.
Was Zaveid his opponent?
Given his choice of weapon and his ability to fight, I'd say it's likely.
What I don't get is why Aifread would end up captured and imprisoned by the Abbey after a fight.
Yeah,
with a
fair
stray
enough, Grail.
warlock.
Well, I'm looking forward to reaching that quote once the time
On their
comes to come to
island.
that game.
Until an exorcist named Melchior took him away, that is.
What? Lord Melchior did?
The Abbey would have captured Aifread about a year ago. Surely it must have caused quite a stir.
I was simply patrolling. I wasn't involved in any such operations. Oh, but I do remember that we suffered a great number of casualties around that time. I never heard why, and when I went to investigate, I found no records of any major deployment. And then I was ordered to cease any such investigation by Lord Melchior.
That's fishy.
He wanted to hide something, clearly. And I think I'm starting to get a picture of what it was.
Suspicious
And
Melchior.
It involves the Abbey?
Okay, while we're sharing quotes, I shared this one on the stream back when I finished Tales of Destiny. And it's not... I don't think it's that much of a spoiler, but, you know, if you care about that stuff, pottery breaking especially, feel free to shut your ears for the next, like, minute or so. But it's such a moving quote, and it's something that I think transcends the game. So while we're sharing quotes, I think I'm going to use this as the epigraph for my next piece on Tales of Destiny and Tales of Vesperia. So I want to just read it again because I can't read it enough times. It strikes such a nice note for me. I want to say one final word to you. I lied to you. You were not chosen. In the beginning, people were blessed with the power to truly understand one another. However, this power was lost by the time of the Aether Wars. But you found that quality within yourself even before you met me. It was very unusual to find someone like you, but your abilities are not extraordinary. This is because this power, this ability, lies dormant within everyone. Eileen said that if everyone in the world could be like you, the world would change for the better. I agree with her. I think I can leave the world in your care. We'll protect the world for the present, but you must decide the future of the world by yourselves. I don't even want to say anything about that now. I'll have plenty to say about it when I publish on it, but it's the kind of quote that just speaks for itself, isn't it? So good, isn't it? And it's, I think it's silly because, I mean, those old school games in so many ways laid a foundation for the games that we play now. And also in some ways were even, I think at least in some senses, more sophisticated or ambitious than some of the games we get nowadays. But I think among some gamers, there's this bias that because those old games are more simplistic in terms of graphics and have smaller worlds, they're not as advanced or worth playing. And oh my goodness, like the level of just the storytelling and the things that they're thinking about in something like Destiny, and even the level of, like you said, Grail, just like the pure irony and the title and the choice of what to name it. Like, everyone owes it to themselves to play at least one game from like the 90s or earlier every single year. Yeah, this guy gets it. But listen, if you think I'm not going to go up far enough to save that poor cat's from solitary confinement within that adorable pink chest, you are sorely mistaken. My man!
So, this is Von Eifread.
I was told to expect a small blonde girl. How many times can I make that joke before people start yelling at me?
Eizen, it's good to see you again.
So you're alive. You could have sent a letter.
No, I appreciate you, Grail. You know I just give you shit.
Have you ever written a letter to another man?
Yeah, that's it, Grail. They understood that they did a Christ narrative in Zestiria, and so they wanted to say to anyone who thought that that was an accident, no, we meant that. Let me show you how much we understand that. We're going to be even clearer about it now.
Aside from my little brother, not even once.
Your brother? Ah, yes.
Little brother?
You told me that once. Eizen, why?
I've got no brother.
Ah, it was a test. We would have passed that test. We time travelers from the future. Is it also an illusion, though? Yeah.
Thanks for luring him out. I owe you one.
Is it Simone? Is Simone also around now? I don't remember. That seems like a Simone thing to do. But I guess Melchior just has
Lord Melchior.
the same heritage. Maybe he's tethered Simone.
My double illusion. Impressive.
I make it a point not to fall for the same tricks twice.
Oh, Grail.
Shouldn't have let you get away last time. I won't make that mistake again.
Why am I here?
Her consciousness has returned, so that is its power.
I was gonna say, this is serious Big Hat Logan energy coming off of Melchior here.
He turned her into a demon.
Jesus.
What?
So he has the ability to Hellionize Seraphim in the language of Zestiria. That's pretty messed up, especially for a legate.
A chain reaction. Your Reaper's curse is quite the dreadful affliction, isn't it? Don't you run away!
I read it, Grail, without further context as some kind of more focused and intentional version of what it is that Dezel and arguably maybe also Eizen does with their kind of Reaper's curse, just causing that suffering and malevolence wherever they go.
Goddamn dragons to take care of.
But maybe we'll find out exactly what gives them that power. I really can't get through their guard. Going there. Oh, that's Gemma somewhere. Bakuro, why, bro? Is there a... We learned how to issue commands last time, right? Just trying to see if there was an easy way to get everyone to target the same enemy. I guess we can try to figure that out after this. I don't want to break the flow of battle too much. Ah, Souls! Speaking of Dark Souls. Son of a bitch! Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Grail. I know we talked a few streams ago about how, oh, we have the last level of, like, guard ability. Now we'll be able to make much quicker work of most enemies, but it doesn't seem to be making the difference I hoped it would. Funny how that works. I do not remember that being the case in Zestiria. Maybe it's part of the world in the story. It's an unfair and baneful world. Capricious, that's the word I was looking for, not baneful. Jesus, does Eleanor just have all of the wrong items or affinities for these guys? Like, nothing is hitting them. She also has no souls, which is not great. I think because they keep giving her status effects. Well, there we go. We made it. It wasn't pretty, but we made it. W's a W, right?
Like you got caught in your own trap, old man.
And he would have gotten away with it if it weren't for us meddling kids.
I'll take care of the last one.
Jump in and kill without a second thought. Is that your creed?
Wow. Can you imagine Zaveid from early game Zestiria saying something like that? Ah, I love that for him. This is really elaborating on his character in a really cool and compelling way for me.
Your Siegfried is just the power I've been looking for.
That seems bad.
Here is done.
What the hell did you do? Wait, damn you! Follow them!
Oh, we got all kinds of goodies for that one. No pottery breaking. Zaveid goes against the grain. Decisively so. Excuse me. Oh my god, put the little souls in the least convenient place, so I really have to go out of my way to be completionist about it.
Take a look at this. I knew this would be big. What a treasure!
Bone Mask! Something I also know just from the extra content padding the end of Vesperia Definitive Edition. I think we still can't go to the Force Islands yet. No. That's level 9, right? Yeah.
Scout ship setting sail.
living through thousands of years and also the Hellenization of someone like Eizen, like, I can imagine that would mess a brother up. So it's nice, but also heartrending to see that in real time. Oh yeah, I don't think I checked out the description for that one yet, Gray. I'll have to do that once we finally level up our little vessel you can ship off there. If I can find a fan-localized version of it, I'll definitely put it on the list. Oh, son of a bitch. Now I thought the door would be open. I thought that's where we're supposed to go next. See, Grail, despite your best attempts to warn me, I got caught in the trap anyways. Speaking of getting caught in traps. Oh man, it really does hurt, doesn't it? It's such a long way back down afterwards. I don't think the chest was worth it. Boy, it really kicks one in the teeth to go back to a game where you can't sprint after playing Arise where you can sprint also. I feel like I just have no agency with which to speed up the party. This music is great also, by the way. I feel like we've been talking Berseria's music to death the last few streams, but it's worth emphasizing once again.
Damn, you sure got some speedy legs for an old fart.
I'm glad to see you're okay, Zaveid.
It's not me that I'm worried
Yeah, thank goodness, Grail. I almost missed that one.
Melchior was highly interested in your weapon. And yet he didn't steal it. Surely a legate like him could snatch it if he wanted to.
Why bother stealing it when you can just copy its hidden formula? Some arts can decipher the workings of other arts in a split second. And guess what Melchior's specialty is? As he left, he said, "My work here is done." The Abbey must have some use for that unknown art. Who knows what? After all, they brought it here from another continent.
And we'll find out what they're after and crush it to dust.
Let me ask you just one question. Why do you have Siegfried?
I'm counting on you, he said. Back when I served
Oh, a Zaveid theme. Speaking of good
he
music.
sent me on a mission to capture Aifread.
Zaveid, you were once their slave?
Yeah, my mind was under the influence of Inominat's domain. But when Aifread aimed this baby at me, one shot was all it took to open my eyes. The fight we had after that was one for the books.
Oh, I love that.
He might have been a human, but that guy was a beast. Put a song in my soul. But then Melchior had to jump in and spirit Aifread away with one of his damned illusions. That old bastard. Playing tricks with people's minds.
But why'd he grab Aifread and not Siegfried when he had the chance?
He probably didn't know at the time that this guy was the real prize he was after. But Aifread knew. Right before he was taken, he distracted Melchior long enough to hand Siegfried over to me. Well, that's all I know. Whether you believe me or not is up to you.
Belief or disbelief rests with you.
Got it.
One of my favorite lines from Majora's Mask.
That was easy.
Aifread only says I'm counting on you to people he trusts.
Is that so?
So, what are you gonna do now?
Gonna keep looking for Aifread. So gotta give this back and settle our score.
I doubt you have much time left to get that done.
I'd hazard a guess that until now, Melchior was unaware what Siegfried could really do. In other words, he and the exorcists weren't able to interrogate anything out of their captive.
And now that Aifread's no longer needed, I see no reason for them to keep him alive.
You think I don't know that?
If you really want to save Aifread, you probably ought to team up with us.
Nope. No can do.
Why not?
You lot will do anything to achieve your goals. Even kill. Sorry, I'm a fighter, not a killer. I won't steal a single life. That's just my creed.
Oh, buddy.
And I've got no intention of changing our pirate creed either.
Eizen and Zaveid have their own creeds. They both have such strong principles, even though they're so different.
Just like humans.
I love that that scene, and to me, that's one of those really cool JRPG moments because, you know, we're introduced to Zaveid in Tales of Zestiria as kind of this, you know, crazy berserker with a gun that he shoots himself with and shouts persona and all of the memeing that we've been doing on that. And by the end of the game, you know, we see the gun as a symbol for, you know, Saray being able to put his friends, the Seraphim, to use for their shared dream of giving people a different path out of the Age of Chaos and saving Heldalf and everything else that it comes to represent. But then to get that insight into how the gun was actually used to save Zaveid, totally, like, it doesn't erase that symbolism or our take on him from Zestiria, but supplements it, I think, where now immediately we understand the Siegfried as like Zaveid's personal path to salvation when he was lost and under the influence of a Nominat and couldn't control himself, and Aifread shot him in order to save him. And so now we understand that this gun is what, you know, we see him touting around and using on himself at the beginning of Zestiria, not just as something to pump himself up, but actually to keep himself grounded and pure and redeemed. And what it is for him to then give the gun to Saray is not just like believing in Saray, but also trying to save the shepherd and give the shepherd that same like gift of salvation that Aifread gave to him. That's so cool. And once again, says so much without saying it explicitly or beating us over the head with it. Because then I get to beat you over the head with it.
Well, that was sure something. Melchior and his illusions are cheats.
There's no cheating in combat.
What I meant is that they were awfully dirty tricks for an upstanding exorcist.
And the illusions seemed so real. Had that gone on any longer, I wouldn't have been able to tell what was real and what was fake.
If it can't be distinguished from reality, perhaps one could live a happier life within the illusion.
That sort of happiness can rot.
You think so?
But by using illusions, you can defeat an opponent without causing them any physical harm.
Oh, how humane. Wow, the Abbey is so great.
Lord Melchior is an exemplary man who has served Lord Artorias since before the Abbey's founding. He's done everything from logistical planning to defense strategy and even political negotiations. He shows the utmost concern, even for his opponents, so...
He turned a friendly Moloch into a dragon.
That was...
Yeah, that's kind of the end of the conversation there, isn't it?
Emotional wounds never fully fade.
Yeah, but...
Don't lose heart, Eleanor. Foul play is foul play, but you're talking to a demon and a witch. Who can judge?
I appreciate that you're trying to console me, but as an exorcist, I cannot accept this.
One does have to feel for Eleanor, I think, because this poor girl, I forget how much insight we get into her background, but it's clear that as an exorcist, she has built her whole belief system and sense of safety in the world on what she didn't realize was a house of cards in terms of the Abbey's overall creed. And so for her to be exposed to all of this evidence and host of experience from the other party members that demonstrates the shortcomings and hypocrisy of the Abbey, it's like she completely has to restructure her understanding of the world and her place in it, and that is so hard to do. All right, we're headed back to Port Renewed now. Yeah, on the world structure and level design, I mean, I've talked about this on the previous streams and I haven't really thought about it more since then, but I feel like for me, the style of this world starting in Zestiria is just very big and grandiose and larger than life, kind of the same architectural style that you get in a lot of old cathedrals, where they're sort of meant to be more impressive as a house of God by virtue of just their size and the degree to which that inspires awe in the people who visit it. I feel like for me, in Tales of Zestiria, between all of its Arthur motifs and like the Christ narrative, that makes a lot of sense and helps create like a cohesive narrative experience for me in terms of like how that feeling of grandiosity mirrors a lot of the epic elements of the stories and the journey of the shepherd and everything. In Berseria, I don't have as clean an argument as to why that makes sense. So maybe part of why, like from that narrative perspective, why it's harder to buy into in Berseria is just that it feels more like holdover from sort of the design philosophy of the previous game, as opposed to something that was custom made for this world. Kind of in contrast, actually, with what we were saying earlier in terms of how a lot of these areas are old, but then some are also new, and making its position in history believable along that dimension, which is kind of interesting.
I thought I smelled someone pondering. What's on your mind, Laphicet?
I know Siegfried comes from another continent and all, but do you know anything else about it, Rokuro?
Nope, can't say I do. All I care about are swords. That contraption doesn't interest me much.
I suppose that makes
Rokuro's
sense.
consistent, if nothing
Looked
else.
real powerful.
Just guessing based on how we saw Zaveid use it, I'd say it amplifies his power somehow.
An amplifier. It's true that he seemed to get stronger when he fired it at himself.
Yeah, and it gave that dying legendary wyvern enough strength to escape.
But wasn't it also what he used to dispel Melchior's illusions back there?
That was also amplification. The Malakim are the source of his arts. The relic pushed them past their limits and kablooey.
Suffice it to say, it can be used both offensively and defensively. It must be very hard to master.
More important is what the Abbey plans to do with it. Not that I really care.
Ooh, which one is Leia from? You've got me looking forward to one that I clearly haven't played yet.
Laffy said?
Celia, there you go. All the more reason for me to dive into that one.
The girl with the umbrella from Lord Melchior's illusion. What is her connection to Eizen? I don't think he'd answer if I asked him myself.
I don't know. I was wondering about her as well.
I don't think I fully processed when I took on Tales of Praxis that there were like almost 20 games in the Tales series. But all the better for a grand and fulfilling project. And after doing all of Xenoblade last year, like, there's only one direction to go from there, right? It's the same kind of scope creep that you get in JRPG stories, but in the domain of JRPG narrative analysis.
She must be really important to him.
Indeed. It must be a deep, naughty relationship.
Come on now.
Oh, Grail. See, I get to know you, and I think I feel seen and that you know me, and then you say something stupid like I would have second thoughts this deep into a project. If nothing else, I will stubbornly finish anything I start. You're talking to someone who wrote over 70,000 words on Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and Ludwig Wittgenstein.
But when she died, he raised her daughter for her.
He had been friends with her since they were children, but they only realized their true feelings after they had been married to someone else.
Is this their idea of romance? In any case, beware of girls, Laphicet.
Right.
I mean, Edna is pretty great. That's all I have to say about that. Damn! You make a compelling argument, Grail. I have no follow-up retort. Well, and I'll tell you, Pottery Breaking, it's quite the project, but I hope you all know, I mean very sincerely what I was saying at the start of the stream. I mean, I'm enjoying it personally as something that, you know, develops more contours and facets as I replay more of the games and start seeing and talking about more of them, not just in a vacuum, but also in conversation with one another. But well and truly, the coolest aspect of it for me as we've continued on with it is in a like shockingly similar way to what happens in a lot of JRPG stories, like the way a bit of a real life crew is starting to amass, going on this analytical book club style journey with me. So I don't take that for granted. It is so cool, and the more we're able to engage in some of this journey together, I think the more fun we're all going to have. The more fun I'm going to have, at least, selfishly. So let me be the Yuri in this adventure and just collect a bunch of cooler, more interesting characters around myself. If that's my role, I'm more than happy with it.
They were nothing.
Pottery breaking, that's a very good point on Edna. I don't disagree with that. Oh, can we just teleport? I should have checked on that earlier. The entrance of any visited town! Yeah, I totally forgot we had those. But it's not letting me use it. Why? Is there another bottle that gets us out of whatever this area is? No. My guess is once we get back to the field area, maybe it'll open up for us. Oh, is that how they work? Listen, I get that there are a million systems in games like this. I understand that it's really hard to make all of them intuitive and accessible to every kind of player. But in what universe does it make sense to have a dedicated button for using this bottle, whereas you're not allowed to use it from the direct item menu off of the main menu? Who made that design decision? I would like to not take them down, not confront them, just have a friendly conversation where they can explain to me what the hell they were thinking. I'd love to know. This is where we were going next, right? I'm not, yeah, okay. If after that whole rant I took us to the wrong place, that would have been, well, honestly, on brand.
Now what are we gonna do?
That's right, Grail. That's the exact answer to that question.
Here, take a look. Huh. It looks pretty old. I've never seen this kind of writing before.
It's not ancient Avarost, that's for sure. Part of it looks like a chronology, so maybe it's a history book?
If I were to guess, I'd say they're Meliodosian characters, which would peg it at about 2,000 years old. It's more recent than Avarost, but the writing has fallen completely out of use.
All kinds of notes are written throughout the book, too. Someone must have been studying it. If it's research material, that might make it Videl's book. Videl? Who's that? He's a weird kid who's way into studying history. He lives at the inn.
Could you maybe deliver the book to him for us? We were told not to get too close to him, so...
Yeah, sure. I guess.
Well, I'm interested. Weird kid into history who lives at an inn and is an outcast?
My book.
Tell me more.
My book. Where could I have left it?
Are you Videl? Is this yours?
My book. Oh, that book is super important to me.
That is really interesting, Grail, and that's something that I hope we get a better beat on in terms of why that's the case or what the story is trying to say with it by the end of this, because I think that's too central a point to a lot of these events, I think, to be accidental or not significant, because especially in comparison with Tales of Zestiria, right, to the best of my knowledge, at least it doesn't come off with a lot of the conversations with random characters that they have a deep or rigorous understanding of the world history and where everything took place and when, how many years in the past. Like, it came off to me in that playthrough as very much the exception to the rule that Mikleo and Saray were so knowledgeable about the past eras of the world. So it's interesting then to see this picture of the past where people were much more historically literate, it seems like, on average. But tell me if you disagree with that. But if that is the case, wonder what that says about the overall trajectory of the world and the relationship between the games, that somewhere along the way we went from this level of engagement with the past to the level or lack thereof that we saw in Zestiria. And remember, Zestiria takes place in the Age of Chaos, so my guess is that's probably a part of the chaos.
Thank you. I'm Laphicet. I hope you don't mind that we flipped through some of it. Can you actually read Meliodacian script?
You recognize Meliodacian writing? That's unusual in this day and age.
Oh, it's not that big of a deal, really.
Oh, maybe it is unusual,
I want to be an adventurer who
as opposed to the norm.
and explores lots of
They might be
ruins.
disproving my
So
point in
that
this
means you're
scene.
ready for anything. I've been studying ancient history, starting with the era of darkness.
The era of darkness? You're referring to the dark period, right?
Right. Almost no written records from the age have survived. But if you compare the history before and after, you can tell something major must have happened.
Wow, that's fascinating.
I know!
Look at those two, all worked up over an old book. My little brother was just like that too. Laffy and our brother used to.
We received reports of suspicious persons in the area.
Velvet.
Have you seen anything?
Not good. They're onto us.
Quickly, hide in my house.
Videl, have you seen anyone suspicious?
Yeah, that's how we know it's a work of fantasy.
Sorry, sir. I've been absorbed in my book.
That's all right, thanks. Look, I know it must be tough living alone with your mom. Just remember, your father's a praetor. He's out there fighting to protect us all. Keep your chin up for his sake at least, all right?
Uh-huh.
Thanks for your help, Videl.
Videl, your father is an exorcist?
Yeah, he is. But don't worry, I won't say anything about you and your friends. I'm your friend too.
Really?
Oh.
And to prove it, I'll let everyone in on a big secret. This book tells you how to make an Omega Elixir, an incredibly ancient and powerful medicine. If I'm reading it right, you need 5 ingredients in order to create the elixir. I've only translated one of them so far, but I'll tell you what it is.
That's really nice of you, Videl. But I don't have any way to repay you for this.
Please,
Great.
think nothing of it. I'd just like it if you can talk with me again sometime.
Don't break the believability of the world.
What are friends for?
That's so sweet to me. Just before I lose the thought from that conversation, pottery breaking, I remember earlier you brought up the idea of Carol as a child character and a child member of the party. And I think something that's really heartwarming to me about that scene that we just saw that maybe also speaks to the value of a child character, in this case Laphicet, is as I'm seeing that and finding it so heartwarming, I find that, at least in my experience, it seems really unusual for a party member in a JRPG to so organically and immediately befriend just an NPC hanging out in the world. And it strikes me that maybe part of what makes that so believable to me and touching is the fact that Laphicet, at the end of the day, like, yeah, you know, he's a Malik and he has these crazy circumstances around the nature of his existence, but he is also just a kid, and kids are really good at making friends in an unassuming and authentic way that oftentimes, sadly, we lose as we get older. So it's a really nice color to see come out in the game that I feel like we don't get to see very often. Also, while we're paused, yes, Grail, that is a very sad state of affairs in terms of people's current understanding of history. But yeah, I always think about the old joke in Friends, which is sadly held up really well, where they're all sitting around the table and like none of them can explain to one another what World War I was fought over or whom America was fighting and why. I think there's just as much truth to that today, sadly. Yeah, that is a fair point, Grail, and I think to the credit of the Tales games, I do feel like their characters hit different notes just based on that small, but as you say, really significant difference in their age brackets. Like the kind of stuff that interests Laphicet and the way in which he sees the world is different than the way that Carol does. I mean, it would be weird, for instance, if Laphicet had a similar kind of like romantic affection or crush on someone like Nan, like we get in Vesperia, right? Whereas it would probably be weird for Carol to as immediately befriend someone as Laphicet just did. Although, like I said earlier, I mean, Rokuro and Eizen kind of do that, so you don't have to grow out of it if that's your character. Yeah, pottery breaking. Maybe that's the point I'm trying to make. It just feels like it's a rare and special thing to see kids interacting with each other, especially when one's in the party in one of these games. It helps add a special kind of heart to it.
The Omega Elixir. That's an ancient medicine said to be able to cure any disease. But it was my understanding that no samples or recipes survived the Era of Darkness.
Meliodacian script was used prior to the Era of Darkness, so I guess it's possible that Badel's recipe might be legit.
He's just a kid. I don't know how much we can trust his translation.
You saw his notes. I doubt many adults...
Absolutely, I loved that too, pottery breaking. That was a really cool sequence of scenes.
Kids are more capable than we give them credit for, especially where their interests lie.
I think we can trust Videl.
Laphi used to read books intently like that too.
Furthermore, couldn't a hypothetical Omega Elixir be quite useful to you, Velvet?
Laphicet, you look like you really want to track down those ingredients.
Yeah, I do.
Personally, I don't really care. But if you want to look for them, I won't stop you.
Okay.
Yeah, all those kids, Grail. They're all what, like 10 to 12 years old? Oh my god, don't get me started on Patty in that dimension. Shoot, what was I going to say? The other thing that's kind of, maybe this is something that's interesting about Carol too, as we're thinking about like kid interactions and the rarity of that. Like this didn't occur to me before we were talking about it now, but something that's also interesting about Carol is he's always kind of punching up in terms of like trying to interact with adults and people who are older than him and trying to like sort of prematurely outgrow his childhood and contribute to the adult world. And I think that's probably a big part of why he has such a hard time, and the unique character of his struggles, but also what allows him to kind of form the guild with the unique character and contributions to the world that Brave Vesperia ultimately does. I think actually just thinking about the effort he makes in that capacity gives me a different respect for him than I had before. Yeah, like talk about the different like end game interactions with Duke. One that touched me way more than I expected to was Carol's confrontation with Duke, where he looks and sees the echo of Whitehorse before they face off with Duke. That's yeah, characters like Carol. So many characters, even if they don't hit you right away. If you give them a chance and think about them, it's a special kind of thing often.
I wanted to just wait it out in a shipyard somewhere, but then the water turned all gooey. Then I had these jellyfish things coming onto the deck, and before I knew it, slugs were swimming around in the damn ocean.
Wouldn't the salt in seawater mess up a slug?
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Weather reporter!
It was scary, I'll tell you that much. You want my advice? Stay the hell away from that island altogether.
Where are all the snails coming from?
Watch out for that gooey stuff.
What did that pirate mean by Class 4? I've never heard of that.
It's a classification the Abbey uses to help inform their strategy, an estimation of how well they've been able to manage the demon outbreak in an area. Administrative Zone Classes 1 through 3 have been assigned a suitable contingent of exorcists to guarantee the population's safety.
So, Class 4 administrative zones are ones that are still unsafe?
Sounds like a place we should explore.
The entire kingdom would be protected, but there's just not enough manpower to go around. The Abbey doesn't send exorcists to remote areas and far-off islands. Instead, they avoid casualties by making those areas off-limits.
But that pirate mentioned he'd come close to an island. Are those policies actually enforced?
They send out an official notice to stay away, and that's all. It's not like they could blockade every tiny remote island out there. So you're free to dive into the deep end if you want, but no one will come to your rescue. Hope you know how to swim.
If they could keep the demons in check, they wouldn't have to tell people to stay clear. Frankly, I think the Abbey just doesn't want to go near places like that.
In other words, these are dangerous places that the Abbey has washed their hands of.
Makes you wonder how much they can administrate these places when they're not willing to get their hands dirty.
Are there many Class 4 administrative zones?
I've heard of 10 such regions in my time working as an inspector for the Abbey.
Oh, sounds like just the right number to visit over the course of a JRPG. How convenient!
It's probably safe to assume that it's getting to be pretty dangerous.
If we go there, we're gonna want to be prepared.
Excellent. Yeah, I feel like... I don't know if this is characteristic of Rita or just the characters in Vesperia more broadly. This is probably something I'll try to think about a little bit for my analysis. But I feel like across the board, they're kind of less interested in apologizing and reconciling with each other than they are with kind of really trying to figure out who they are and what it is they care about. So like, you know, for instance, someone like Estelle trying to realize like, no, actually, I don't really want to be a princess. I'm interested in being like a storyteller. I think that would be cool. And Rita, you know, being like, man, you know, I don't want to live alone and find my friends in these inert objects that are Blastia. I want to look to people like Estelle, who I feel like I really get and can invest in, and that can give me like a different kind of meaning in my life. Which I feel like then when it comes to characters who have more fraught relationships with one another in one way or another, like Rita and Carol, if you're expecting the typical arcs of reconciliation and friendship across the board in a party that you get in many JRPGs, that expectation kind of falls flat on its face because it's not the same kind of growth as most of them go through, I feel like. Like even Raven, right? I mean, with, I guess, more significant spoilers for people who haven't played the game, right? But it's not really an act of apology or redemption that he undertakes for, like, betraying the group as Schwann. It's more of, like, his own personal growth of deciding that he wants to be someone other than Schwann and taking that new understanding of himself along with the party in their journey moving forward.
Demons! There's more of them! A whole band of them rampaging through Roarg Forest!
There was already one dangerous demon in those woods, and now we have more! And they're still on the loose! A lot of exorcists have come to deal with them, but...
What do these demons look like?
That's what I want to know. Those Abbey people won't tell us nothing.
So we're left to speculate wildly about it.
Cargo this and only port for a while that. How are we supposed to catch any fish?
These demons really are a pain in the neck. If I was an exorcist, I'd lay down justice.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement at this point that Raven is very cool. But that doesn't mean it's not worth saying over and over again.
You guys should be careful. There are demons about.
Thanks for the warning.
All right, we're rounding 8 o'clock, so I say we can go back to the dock to move things forward, and then we can move to wrap things up for the evening after that. It's a nice chunk of story, nice chunk of conversation. I think, I don't know about you, Grail, you can be the judge, but I feel like we struck a pretty good balance this evening for us.
You're all right.
Sorry to worry you.
No, Grail, I think that's a pretty hot take. You're going to want to show your work on that one.
But now I know the
No, I'm with you, obviously.
somewhere. Well, of course he is.
Not that he has a lot of time left.
What do you
The way she walked through there.
Eizen, you stay calm too, okay?
Oh.
And you've all taken your Salatoma?
Yes, sir.
And nobody died?
All still kicking.
Compared to your curse, sir, the sickness was tiny potatoes.
All right. Then let's get ready to sail out.
Already done, sir.
We're ready whenever.
The Pirate's Creed, huh?
There's worse out there.
Eleanor is wrestling with some stuff. There's no doubt about that. All right, I'll go back and do a proper save. Yeah, but a little more evenly spread out. Perhaps that's the difference that I'm feeling this time around, since I didn't lecture at you for the first 40 minutes this time around, Grail. But yes, I think that was a good chunk, a nice adventure. We started out the stream on a journey to save everyone from the what was it called? The Corsair Scourge, and we accomplished that. And we were able to get to know Zaveid better, see some of his origin story, confront Melchior, get a better understanding of Eizen and his relationship with Aifread. I think we covered a healthy amount of ground, to be sure. And all the more ground for thinking through this game in a lot more depth, and frankly, I think a whole gamut of the Tales games in much more depth, which really invigorated me. Always nice to have a stream like that, especially in the middle of the week, and especially as I'm putting my thoughts together, not just for Vesperia and Destiny, but also Berseria, obviously, and now Arise. So I hope the juggling of all of that is rewarding and interesting to you all, as opposed to just total whiplash. But it seems that way from the chat, so I think it's good to keep rocking on with that. I know you're in the future, Grail. Time zones are nuts, aren't they? I'll wrap it up not just with an expression of gratitude for the great stream, but especially, as always, Grail, my stalwart live conversation companion. Pottery Breaking, my friend, I'm so glad that you decided to hop over from YouTube to join the conversation. I hope you ended up enjoying it. Like Grail said, I think this is pretty representative of what we try to do on the streams. I was really grateful for your contributions. You definitely add a lot to the conversation. So I really hope you come back if you enjoyed it as much as I did. Also, Stensinator. Yes, it was great to see you back. I'm so glad you were able to get a taste for our other content outside of the interviews that we do with amazing other thinkers in the gaming world, such as Sean, the creator of Hero's Purpose. So if you enjoyed it, hope you come back too. For anyone else, such as Grail or Pottery Breaking, who may be in the process of discovering us through YouTube, whether you're a Tales vet like this good crowd, or someone who just loves the storytelling of video games and wants a venue to talk about that, dig into these games a little deeper, think about the language of their narrative and what makes them so special as works of art, feel free to hop on the stream that happens every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's always a joy to wrangle together the real-life JRPG party and go off on these journeys together. I'm really loving the camaraderie, too, that is starting to emerge among this band of misfits with very different backgrounds. That was a nice note to wrap up on, too, as we set off on the next leg of the journey. So that has me excited for where we're going next, what poor Eleanor will be wrestling with, but also the way the gang will come together with whatever it is they end up needing to overcome. So I'm looking forward to that. Friday streams are always a fantastic way to kick off the weekend. So I do hope to see you back here on Friday, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern. I have lots of opinions on law, so I'm definitely happy to contribute those, Grail. I'm so glad you had fun Pottery Breaking. I'll look for you back. Obviously, no pressure, but whenever you can and are interested, we'll always be here and excited to have you. Grail, it's fun when we just riff at each other too, but yes, it always adds a different flavor to it when you have more characters in the party, right? Think about the difference in skits from when it's, just a couple of characters at the beginning to when you've got the whole gang together. It's very similar to that, so it's nice to be able to experience both sides of it. All right, friends, thinkers, gamers, that's a wrap for this evening. Thank you so much for your time and thoughts, and book clubbing through the gaming world. I'm Aaron Suduko, your host, the founder of With a Terrible Fate. Look for more written analyses on Tales and a lot else to come very soon. Look for more updates on our convention presentation at PAX as we develop it over the coming weeks. And be back here same time on Friday for more Tales of Berseria and chatting about the Tales games. Cheers, my friends. Until then.